What would you do if a stranger knocked on your door and asked if you'd invaded their privacy? When Daniel Carter found a rose gold phone wedged deep in his couch cushions, he had no idea it belonged to the mysterious CEO who just moved in across the hall, or that one accidental glimpse at her screen would change both their lives forever. This is a story about secrets, second chances, and two broken people learning to trust again. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The afternoon sun slanted through the half-broken blinds of Daniel Carter's third-floor apartment, casting tiger stripes across the worn hardwood floor. Austin heat pressed against the windows like an unwelcome guest, making the small living room feel even smaller. Daniel knelt beside the sagging brown couch, a Craigslist find from 3 years ago that had seen better days, and fished out another candy wrapper from between the cushions. How does she even get these down here, he muttered to himself, holding up a crumpled starburst wrapper like evidence in a trial. From the bedroom down the narrow hallway, silence. His 6-year-old daughter, Emma, was taking her Saturday afternoon nap, a sacred ritual that gave Daniel exactly 90 minutes to clean, prep dinner, and maybe, just maybe, sit down for 5 consecutive minutes. At 33, Daniel had the kind of face that made people trust him immediately. Honest eyes. The kind of stubble that suggested he'd been too busy to shave rather than trying to cultivate a look. And hands that were perpetually stained with engine grease no matter how hard he scrubbed. He'd been working at Martinez Auto Repair for 11 years now, ever since he'd dropped out of community college when Emma's mother left them. That was the story he told people anyway. The clean version. The one that didn't include the fights, the empty bank account she'd drained, or the note she'd left on the kitchen counter that simply read, "I can't do this." Daniel lifted the middle couch cushion, expecting more candy wrappers or maybe one of Emma's missing crayons. Instead, his fingers brushed against something smooth and cool. A phone. He pulled it out carefully, as if it might explode. Rose gold case. Sleek. Expensive looking. The kind of phone that costs more than his monthly rent. A small charm dangled from it. A silver letter V on a delicate chain. Daniel's first thought was that someone from the building had left it during last week's impromptu hallway gathering. Mrs. Chen from 3B had brought dumplings. Marcus and Julio from downstairs had contributed a Bluetooth speaker and terrible playlist choices. People had drifted in and out of apartments all evening. But as he turned the phone over in his calloused hands, a scent drifted up. Subtle, floral. Not the drugstore body spray smell that most people in the building wore, but something more refined. French, maybe. The kind of perfume that came in a heavy glass bottle with a name Daniel couldn't pronounce. And just like that, he knew. Victoria Hayes. Apartment 3C, right across the hall. Daniel had seen her exactly 4 times since she'd moved in 3 weeks ago. Each encounter had been brief, polite, and oddly formal. She was the kind of woman who seemed to exist in a different dimension than the rest of the building's residents. While everyone else shuffled around in gym shorts and old t-shirts, Victoria wore tailored blazers and heels that clicked purposefully against the hallway's linoleum. The first time he'd seen her, she'd been directing 2 movers who looked terrified of scratching her furniture. Daniel had been coming home from a double shift, covered in motor oil, and she'd glanced at him with the kind of neutral acknowledgement people give to strangers in elevators. The second time, he'd held the building's front door open for her while juggling Emma and a bag of groceries. Victoria had thanked him with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and swept past smelling like that same expensive perfume. The third time had been different. Daniel had been in his hallway struggling with a stuck deadbolt at 2 in the morning. Emma had been sick, and he'd run down to the 24-hour pharmacy for children's Tylenol. When he'd finally gotten his door open, he'd noticed Victoria standing in her own doorway across the hall, watching him with an unreadable expression. "Is everything all right?" she'd asked quietly. "Yeah," Daniel had replied, surprised she was awake. "Kid stuff, nothing serious." She'd nodded once, something flickering across her face. Concern? Understanding? Before disappearing back into her apartment. The fourth time had been just yesterday. Daniel had encountered her in the building's cramped mailroom. She'd been standing in front of the wall of bronze mailboxes, staring at a thick manila envelope with a return address Daniel couldn't quite see. She'd looked different somehow. Tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. Mail day. Daniel had said stupidly, immediately regretting the obvious statement. Victoria had turned, and for a split second her corporate mask had slipped. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but then she'd smiled, that same professional smile, and said, "Indeed it is." Now standing in his living room holding her phone, Daniel wondered about the woman who lived across the hall. The building manager, Lou, had mentioned she was some kind of CEO. "Big shot from California," Lou had said while fixing the washer in the basement. "Wellness company or something. Don't know why she'd move into a place like this." Daniel had to admit it was odd. Their building wasn't terrible, but it wasn't exactly luxury living either. Thin walls, unreliable hot water, a permanently broken elevator that everyone had stopped reporting. Not the kind of place you'd expect to find a CEO. He was about to send the phone on the kitchen counter when the screen suddenly blazed to life. Daniel nearly dropped it. A notification had triggered the display. Calendar reminder. Board meeting prep. 6 p.m. But that's not what made Daniel's breath catch. The lock screen photo. It was Victoria, but not the Victoria he'd seen in the hallways. This Victoria stood by a tall window, natural light washing over her face. No makeup, no blazer, just a white t-shirt and what looked like genuine peace in her expression. Her dark hair, usually pulled back in a severe bun, fell loose around her shoulders. She was looking slightly away from the camera, caught in a moment of private thought. It was intimate, unguarded. The kind of photo you take for yourself, not for anyone else. Daniel's thumb hovered over the screen, the lock appearing after 3 seconds of inactivity. His heart hammered against his ribs. "I didn't mean to see that," he thought frantically. "The screen just came on. I wasn't snooping. But would she believe that?" He set the phone down on the kitchen counter as if it were radioactive and backed away from it. Through the thin wall that separated his apartment from 3C, he could hear the faint sound of music. Classical something. Victoria was home. Daniel glanced at the phone, then at his front door, then back at the phone. The right thing to do was obvious. Just walk across the hall, knock, return the phone, done. 30 seconds of mild awkwardness, and the whole thing would be over. But something held him back. Maybe it was the memory of her red-rimmed eyes in the mailroom. Maybe it was the vulnerability in that lock screen photo. Maybe it was just the bone-deep exhaustion of a man who'd been carefully neutral with everyone in his life for so long that the thought of any genuine human interaction felt dangerous. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, badly in need of a cut, and tried to think. "Just slip it under her door," a voice in his head suggested. No conversation necessary. But even as the thought formed, he knew it was cowardly. And despite everything life had thrown at him, despite the compromises and the cut corners and the dreams he'd quietly buried, Daniel Carter wasn't a coward. He was still debating his next move when 3 sharp knocks echoed through his apartment. Daniel froze. The knocks came again. Precise. Purposeful. Not the friendly rat-a-tat of Mrs. Chen or the aggressive pounding of the landlord when rent was late. Somehow, Daniel knew exactly who was standing on the other side of his door. He crossed the small living room in 4 steps and pulled the door open. Victoria Hayes stood in the hallway, and for the first time since she'd moved in, Daniel saw her up close in full light. She was taller than he'd realized, maybe 5'8", and younger too, mid-30s, he guessed. She wore dark jeans and a simple gray sweater, no heels, no corporate armor. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and there were faint circles under her eyes that expensive concealer usually hid. But it was her eyes themselves that caught Daniel off guard. Dark brown, almost black, and currently looking directly into his with an intensity that made him want to step backward. "Did you open my phone?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, controlled, but there was something beneath it. Not anger exactly, something more complex. Worry, maybe. Or fear. Daniel's mind raced. He could lie. Tell her he'd just found it, that he was about to return it, that the screen never came on. She had no way to prove otherwise. But as Victoria stood there, waiting for his answer with those impossibly direct eyes, Daniel felt something shift inside him. He was tired. Tired of being careful. Tired of saying the safe thing. Tired of existing in the narrow space between keeping his head down and keeping Emma safe. "The screen lit up when I picked it up," he said, meeting her gaze. "A notification popped up, and the photo opened automatically. I locked it immediately. I didn't go through anything else." The words hung in the air between them. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something in her shoulders relaxed microscopically. I believe you, she said. Daniel blinked. You do? You could have lied, Victoria replied. Most people would have, but you didn't. She glanced past him into the apartment, not invasively, just with the quick assessment of someone used to reading rooms. Do you have a minute? Yeah, sure. Daniel stepped back, hyper-aware of the cluttered coffee table, the laundry basket in the corner, Emma's coloring book scattered across the floor. Sorry about the mess. I was cleaning. It's not messy, Victoria said, and she sounded like she meant it. It's lived in. There's a difference. She moved past him with the kind of grace that made Daniel conscious of his own body, too big for the small space, too rough around the edges. Victoria stood in the center of his living room, and somehow the shabby furniture and scuffed floors looked shabbier in her presence. Daniel grabbed the phone from the kitchen counter and held it out. I really was going to bring it over. I just wasn't sure if I should knock or slide it under your door or… Daniel! He stopped mid-sentence. She knew his name. Of course she knew his name. They'd probably been introduced at some point, or maybe she'd asked Lou, or maybe she just paid attention to the names on the mailboxes. Victoria took the phone but didn't look at it. Instead, she kept her eyes on his. Can I sit down for a minute? Oh, yeah, of course. Daniel gestured at the couch, then remembered the questionable state of the cushions. I mean, it's not the most comfortable. It's fine. Victoria sat on the edge of the couch, perched there like a bird ready to take flight. She turned the phone over in her hand, studying it. That photo you saw, the one on my lock screen. You don't have to explain. I want to. Victoria looked up at him, and there was something raw in her expression now, something that matched the vulnerability in that photo. I took it 3 weeks ago. The day I moved into this building, I was standing by my bedroom window, and the light was just right. For a moment, I felt like myself. Not Victoria Hayes, CEO, not the daughter of Harrison Hayes, not someone's ex-wife, just me. Daniel lowered himself into the armchair across from her, the springs creaking in protest. Why are you telling me this? Because you were honest with me, Victoria said simply. And honesty is rare enough that I'd like to return the favor. From down the hallway, a small sound. Emma, stirring in her room but not quite awake. Victoria's gaze flickered toward the sound, then back to Daniel. Your daughter? Emma, she's 6. Daniel felt the familiar need to explain, to fill the silence with the safe details of his life. It's just the two of us. Has been since she was a baby. That must be difficult. It's what it is. Daniel shrugged, a gesture he'd perfected over the years, dismissive enough to end the conversation, but not so cold that it seemed rude. But Victoria didn't take the hint. I read somewhere that single parents work the equivalent of 2 full-time jobs, and that's not counting the emotional labor. Daniel studied her, surprised. You don't have kids? No. Something flickered across Victoria's face. But I have a company with 127 employees, and sometimes the emotional labor of keeping that many lives stable feels impossible. I can't imagine doing it for an actual child. It was the most human thing Daniel had heard her say. What kind of company? He asked. Wellness. We make organic supplements, partner with meditation apps, run corporate wellness programs. Victoria's mouth curved in a smile that didn't quite land. We help people find balance, which is ironic, considering I moved here because my own life was completely out of balance. Is that why you left California? Partly. Victoria set the phone down on the coffee table between them, screen down, as if she couldn't bear to look at it. I was married to someone who worked in tech, very successful, very demanding, very convinced that success meant sacrificing everything else. She paused. I started the company while we were together, built it from nothing. But at some point, I realized I was so busy helping other people find balance that I'd completely lost my own. Daniel knew that feeling. Different context, same truth. So you left, he said. So I left. Victoria leaned back slightly, and Daniel noticed how her shoulders seemed to carry weight, even when she was sitting still. Filed for divorce, sold the house, moved to Austin because everyone said it was the next big tech hub. But honestly, I just wanted somewhere that wasn't California. Somewhere I could breathe. And you chose this building? Victoria laughed, and it was the first genuinely unguarded sound Daniel had heard from her. I know. My CFO nearly had a heart attack, but all the luxury high-rises felt like glass cages. I wanted something real, something with actual neighbors, not just people who live in proximity to each other. Well, you got that, Daniel said. Mrs. Chen will know your entire life story within a month. Marcus and Julio will invite you to every cookout they have, which is approximately every weekend. And Lou will definitely try to fix you up with his nephew. Has he tried with you? His niece, 3 times. Daniel grinned despite himself. I keep telling him I don't have time to date, but Lou's convinced that everyone needs companionship. Don't you? Victoria asked, and there was no judgment in the question, just genuine curiosity. Daniel's grin faded. I have Emma. That's enough. Is it? The question hung there, gentle but insistent, and Daniel felt something crack open inside his chest. When was the last time someone had asked him a question like that? A real question, not just polite conversation. I don't know, he admitted, the words surprising him even as he spoke them. I stopped thinking about what I want a long time ago. Now I just think about what Emma needs. Victoria nodded slowly. That's a form of love, but it's also a form of disappearing. The observation landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through Daniel's carefully constructed defenses. Before he could respond, Emma's voice called out from the bedroom. Daddy? I should go, Victoria said, standing immediately. I've taken up enough of your Saturday. You haven't. Daniel stood too, suddenly not wanting her to leave. I mean, it's fine. I'm just going to make her a snack and probably watch the same cartoon for the 15th time. Victoria smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Sounds perfect, actually. They walked to the door together, navigating the narrow space. Daniel could smell that perfume again, softer now, mixing with something else. Lavender shampoo, maybe. Thank you, Victoria said, phone in hand, for being honest, and for listening. Thank you for knocking instead of just assuming the worst. Daddy? Emma's voice again, more insistent. Victoria glanced toward the hallway, then back at Daniel. For a moment, she seemed to be weighing something, making a calculation. I'm cooking tonight, she said finally. Nothing fancy, just pasta, but I always make too much. Hazard of cooking for one after years of cooking for two. If you and Emma haven't eaten yet. She trailed off, leaving the invitation hanging. Daniel's first instinct was to decline, to retreat back into the safe boundaries of his life where neighbors stayed neighbors and didn't complicate things. But then he thought about Victoria sitting in her apartment alone, eating pasta and pretending that starting over wasn't terrifying. He thought about that lock screen photo, that moment of peace she'd captured and then hidden away on a device she kept locked. He thought about what she'd said. That's a form of love, but it's also a form of disappearing. What time? Daniel asked. Surprise flickered across Victoria's face, followed by something that looked like relief. 7? That gives you time for cartoons and whatever snack ritual comes next. 7 works. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, suddenly aware that he was smiling. Actually smiling. Fair warning, though. Emma's 6, so conversation topics will include unicorns, her stuffed rabbit named Pancake, and why broccoli is evil plant food. I'll prepare my arguments in favor of broccoli. Good luck with that. Victoria stepped into the hallway, then turned back. Daniel? Yeah? That photo you saw. I don't show that version of myself to many people. Most days I'm not even sure she exists anymore. Victoria's voice was quiet but steady. But I wanted you to know that I'm glad you saw it. Because at least one person in this building knows I'm trying to be more than just the CEO across the hall. Before Daniel could respond, she walked to her apartment, unlocked the door, and disappeared inside. Daniel stood in his doorway for a long moment, listening to Emma sing some made-up song about butterflies in the bedroom. The hallway smelled like cooking from other apartments. Mrs. Chen's dumplings, something with cumin from 2A, the perpetual burnt coffee smell from the broken ventilation system. Normal. Ordinary. The same building he'd lived in for 3 years, but something had shifted. Some small crack in the routine that Daniel had built so carefully around himself and Emma. Daddy! Emma appeared in the hallway, her blonde hair sticking up in 17 directions, clutching Pancake the rabbit. I'm hungry, and Pancake says he wants goldfish crackers. Pancake has very specific demands, Daniel said, scooping her up. She smelled like sleep and the strawberry shampoo they used. "Is there a lady coming for dinner?" Emma asked, because of course she'd heard. The walls in this place were basically paper. "Yeah," Daniel said, carrying her toward the kitchen. "The lady from across the hall. Her name is Victoria." "Does she like unicorns?" "I don't know. You'll have to ask her." Emma considered this seriously, her 6-year-old brain working through important social calculations. "Okay, but if she doesn't like unicorns, she has to sit in the not-favorite chair." Daniel laughed, setting her down on the kitchen counter so she could watch him prepare her snack. "Deal, but maybe give her a chance before you relegate her to the not-favorite chair." "What's relegate?" "It means to send someone to a less important position." "Oh." Emma swung her legs, pancake dangling from one hand. "Daddy, you used a big word. Are you nervous?" Sometimes Daniel forgot how perceptive she was. Too smart for her own good. That's what his mother said during their weekly phone calls. "Maybe a little," he admitted, pulling out the goldfish crackers. "It's okay to be nervous," Emma said sagely. "Miss Jennifer at school says nervous means you care about something." "Miss Jennifer sounds very wise." "She is. She has a boyfriend and everything." Daniel poured crackers into a bowl, filing away that piece of information for later. Emma had been talking about Miss Jennifer a lot lately. They spent the next hour doing the usual Saturday afternoon routine. Crackers, cartoon, coloring session, where Emma insisted on making every horse purple. "Because regular horse colors are boring, Daddy." But underneath the routine, Daniel felt something new humming beneath his skin. Anticipation, maybe. Or possibility. Or maybe just the simple, terrifying fact that for the first time in 6 years, he'd accepted an invitation that had nothing to do with Emma's needs and everything to do with his own curiosity about a woman who wore expensive perfume and took secret photos of her unguarded self. At 6:30, Daniel stood in front of his bathroom mirror and attempted to make himself presentable. He'd showered, scrubbed the worst of the engine grease from under his fingernails, and found a clean shirt that didn't have any mysterious stains. Emma sat on the closed toilet lid, pancake in her lap, supervising. "You smell like the fancy soap," she observed. "Is that bad?" "No, it's good. You should smell nice for the unicorn lady." "We don't know if she likes unicorns yet." "Everyone likes unicorns, Daddy. Some people just don't know it yet." At 6:58, Daniel stood outside apartment 3C with Emma's hand in his and Pancake tucked under her other arm. He could hear music through the door, not classical this time, but something jazzy and warm. He knocked. The door opened and Victoria stood there in jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair down around her shoulders like in the photo. She looked younger somehow, less armored. "Hi," she said, and her eyes moved from Daniel to Emma. "You must be Emma." Emma studied Victoria with the serious intensity of a 6-year-old judge. "Do you like unicorns?" Victoria didn't miss a beat. "I think they're deeply underrated as mythical creatures. Dragons get all the press, but unicorns have that whole healing magic thing going for them." Emma's face split into a grin. "You can sit in the favorite chair." "I'm honored." Victoria stepped back, gesturing them inside. "Come in. Fair warning, I wasn't lying about making too much pasta. I think I accidentally made enough to feed 12 people. Daniel stepped into Victoria's apartment and stopped. It was the same layout as his, tiny hallway, living room, kitchen combination, single bedroom and bathroom off to the side. But Victoria had transformed it into something completely different. Plants everywhere, trailing from shelves, sitting in corners, hanging in macrame holders by the windows. Books lining makeshift shelves, not organized by color or size, but clearly read, with worn spines and post-it notes marking pages. Art on the walls that looked like it came from actual galleries, and lighting, soft, warm lamps creating pools of amber light that made the whole space feel like a sanctuary. "Whoa," Emma breathed. "It's like a fairy house." Victoria laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." The small dining table was set for 3, with actual cloth napkins and everything. A pot of pasta sat in the center, steam still rising, alongside a simple salad and a basket of bread. "Please tell me you like carbonara," Victoria said, suddenly looking uncertain. "I realized after I invited you that I never asked about dietary restrictions or allergies or if Emma even eats pasta." "We love pasta," Daniel assured her, "and Emma will eat approximately anything that isn't green and cruciferous." Crucy what? Emma asked. Broccoli family, Victoria translated, which is not on tonight's menu, so you're safe. They settled around the table, and for a few minutes there was just the comfortable quiet of serving food and settling in. Emma asked if she could hold a plant. Gently, sweetheart, Daniel warned, and Victoria showed her the small, succulent collection on the windowsill. This one's my favorite, Victoria said, pointing to a tiny jade plant. I've had it for 8 years. It survived 3 moves, 1 divorce, and a period where I forgot to water it for 2 months. Plants are forgiving, Daniel said, twirling pasta on his fork. More forgiving than people, usually. Victoria met his eyes across the table, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. As they ate, conversation flowed more easily than Daniel expected. Emma chattered about school and Pancake's various adventures, and Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions that weren't just polite filler. So Pancake solved the mystery of the missing crayons? Victoria asked seriously. He did. They were under my bed the whole time. Pancake's very smart. Clearly a rabbit of many talents. Daniel watched them interact and felt something loosen in his chest. Emma didn't warm up to people quickly. Too many years of just the two of them. Too many babysitters who'd checked their phones instead of listening. But she was leaning toward Victoria like a plant toward sunlight. Your turn, Emma announced, pointing at Victoria with her fork. Daniel made a mental note to review table manners later. Tell us a story about you. Victoria glanced at Daniel, who shrugged. She's very democratic about story sharing. Okay. Victoria set down her fork and thought for a moment. When I was a little girl, I wanted to be a veterinarian. Not because I was particularly good with animals, but because I liked the idea of helping things that couldn't ask for help. Did you? Emma asked. Did I what? Become a veterinarian? No, Victoria said softly. I became something else. Someone who helps people, but in a different way. I run a company that makes things to help people feel better. Like medicine? Sort of like medicine, more like vitamins and tools for feeling calm. Emma considered this. Do you like it? The question was so simple, so direct, that Daniel saw Victoria actually pause to think about her answer. I like helping people, she said finally. But sometimes I'm not sure if I like how big it got. When it was just me and 2 employees working out of a tiny office, it felt like we were building something real. Now it's... She trailed off. Bigger, Daniel supplied. Bigger, Victoria agreed. And complicated. My daddy fixes cars, Emma announced proudly. He makes them work when they're broken. That's a good job, Victoria said, looking at Daniel. Essential work. People need their cars to work. Daniel felt the familiar defensive tension rise in his chest. The assumption that she was being condescending, that she was comparing his work to hers and finding his lacking. But then he saw her expression. No judgment. No pity. Just genuine respect. It pays the bills, he said, the automatic response he'd given 1,000 times. Is that all it does? There it was again. That gentle insistence on honesty, on going deeper than the surface. Daniel set down his fork. I used to want to be an engineer, went to community college for it, had this whole plan, finish my 2-year degree, transfer to UT, maybe work for Tesla or SpaceX or one of those companies doing impossible things. He smiled, but it felt crooked. Then Emma came along, and the plan changed. Do you regret it? Victoria asked quietly. Emma had gotten distracted by the succulent collection again, giving them a bubble of adult conversation. No, Daniel said, and meant it. I don't regret Emma, not for a second. But do I wonder sometimes what that other life would have looked like? Yeah, I do. That's not the same as regret. No, Daniel agreed. It's not. Victoria reached for the salad, and Daniel noticed her hands. No wedding ring, but there was a thin line of paler skin on her left ring finger where one used to be. You said you were married, he said, then immediately worried he'd overstepped. But Victoria just nodded. For 6 years. Met him at a business conference. He was giving a talk on disruption in traditional markets, and I was in the audience pretending to understand half of what he said. She smiled at the memory. He was brilliant, driven, absolutely certain that the future belonged to people who were willing to sacrifice everything for their vision. Sounds intense. It was, At first, that intensity felt like passion. We built things together, his company, my company, this life that looked perfect from the outside. Victoria's voice went quiet. But somewhere along the way, I realized we'd built a beautiful shell with nothing real inside it. We were partners in ambition, but we'd forgotten to be partners in life. Daniel understood that more than he wanted to admit. My ex, he said slowly, Emma's mom. She left when Emma was 8 months old, just left. Note on the counter, bank account emptied, gone. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. I'm sorry. I was angry for a long time, then I was just tired. Now I'm... Daniel searched for the word. Grateful, maybe? Emma deserves better than someone who didn't want to be here. That's a generous way to look at it. It's the only way I can look at it without losing my mind. Emma returned to the table, and the conversation shifted back to safer territory. Favorite colors, best pizza toppings, whether winter or summer was superior. But underneath the light chatter, Daniel felt the presence of something deeper. Two people who'd both been abandoned in different ways, both trying to build new lives from the rubble. After dinner, Emma insisted on showing Victoria how Pancake could do tricks, which mostly involved Emma moving the stuffed rabbit around while providing voiceover narration. Victoria watched with the kind of attention that made Emma glow. At 8:30, Daniel noticed Emma starting to fade. The telltale signs, rubbing her eyes, leaning against his leg, Pancake getting more cuddles than usual. We should go, he said. Someone's about 30 minutes from turning into a pumpkin. I'm not a pumpkin, Daddy. That's Cinderella's carriage. My mistake. Victoria walked them to the door, and Daniel noticed she seemed reluctant to see them leave. Thank you for coming, she said. I haven't had people over since I moved in. This was nice. Nice felt like an inadequate word for what the evening had been, but Daniel let it stand. Thank you for the pasta, he said, and for being patient with the unicorn interrogation. I passed the test, so I'm calling it a win. Victoria crouched down to Emma's level. Thanks for the company, Emma, and tell Pancake he's welcome any time. Emma, shy now that they were leaving, just nodded and pressed her face against Daniel's leg. They crossed the hallway to their own apartment, and just before Daniel closed the door, he looked back. Victoria stood in her doorway, backlit by the warm glow of her plant-filled apartment, watching them with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. She lifted her hand in a small wave. Daniel waved back. Then both doors closed, and the hallway was quiet again. Later, after Emma was asleep and Daniel was loading the dishwasher, he found himself thinking about Victoria's apartment. The plants, the books, the careful way she'd built a sanctuary in the same small space that felt so cramped in his own place. He thought about the lock screen photo, that moment of peace she'd captured and then hidden away. He thought about her question, don't you need companionship? And for the first time in 6 years, Daniel let himself wonder if maybe the answer was yes. Across the hall, Victoria sat by her window with a cup of tea, looking out at the Austin skyline. The same window from the photo, the same light, though dimmer now with evening settling in. She thought about Daniel's honest eyes and gentle competence with his daughter, the way he'd admitted his dreams without bitterness, the way he'd built a life around Emma's needs without complaint. She thought about how long it had been since she'd had a real conversation with someone who wasn't an employee or investor or ex-husband's attorney. She thought about how normal felt, for the first time in months, like something she could actually achieve. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her. A text from her CFO. Board meeting moved to Tuesday. Need updated projections by Monday. Victoria looked at the message, then at the window, then back at the message. For once, she didn't immediately respond. Instead, she set the phone face down and went back to looking at the lights of the city, thinking about the man across the hall who fixed broken cars and raised his daughter alone, and maybe understood, more than anyone else she'd met in Austin, what it meant to start over. In the quiet of the building, two neighbors settled into their separate apartments. Neither of them slept quite as alone as they had the night before. The following Tuesday arrived with the kind of oppressive humidity that made Austin feel like a wet blanket had been thrown over the entire city. Daniel's alarm went off at 5:30, same as always, and he went through his morning routine on autopilot. Shower, coffee, check that Emma's backpack had everything she needed for school. He hadn't seen Victoria since Saturday night. Not that he'd been looking for her. Not exactly. But he'd been aware of the sounds from across the hall in a way he hadn't before. The click of her door at 7 each morning. The classical music that drifted through the walls some evenings. The sound of her heels in the hallway, purposeful and quick. Sunday had passed quietly. Daniel had taken Emma to the park, done laundry, meal prepped for the week. Normal things, safe things. He'd thought about knocking on Victoria's door to say thank you again for dinner, but the moment never felt right. Too eager. Too presumptuous. Monday had been a double shift at the garage, a transmission rebuild that turned into a nightmare when they discovered the previous mechanic had used the wrong fluid. Daniel had gotten home after Emma was already asleep, courtesy of Mrs. Chen's babysitting. Now it was Tuesday, and Daniel was dropping Emma off at school when he saw the black Mercedes SUV idling in the fire lane. He wouldn't have paid attention except that he recognized the woman standing beside it. Victoria wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent, her hair pulled back severely, talking on her phone with the kind of clipped precision that made people listen. The corporate armor was back in place, and she looked every inch the CEO that Lou had described. Daniel felt Emma's hand tighten in his. "Is that the unicorn lady?" she whispered. "Yeah," Daniel said quietly, "but she's working right now. We shouldn't bother her." But Victoria had already seen them. She said something into the phone, then lowered it, her expression shifting from business to something softer. "Daniel, Emma." She walked over and Daniel noticed she moved differently in heels, taller, more commanding. "Good morning?" "Morning," Daniel replied. "We're just... Emma's school is right there." "Miss Jennifer's class," Emma announced. "Do you have to work?" Victoria glanced down at her suit as if suddenly remembering what she was wearing. "I do. Big meeting this morning." "That's the car that's taking you?" Emma pointed at the Mercedes. "Company car," Victoria said, and something in her voice suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with it. "My CFO insists. Says it's on brand." She made air quotes around the last part. The driver emerged from the SUV, a young man in a black suit who looked uncomfortable in the Texas heat. "Ms. Hayes, we should go. Traffic on I-35 is backing up." "I know, Marcus. 2 minutes." Victoria turned back to Daniel and Emma. "I'm sorry I haven't been around. Work has been—" "You don't have to apologize," Daniel said quickly. "You're busy. We get it." But something in Victoria's expression cracked slightly. "Do you?" Before Daniel could respond, Emma tugged on his hand. "Daddy, we're going to be late. Miss Jennifer does star stickers for on time." "Right. Sorry, sweetheart." Daniel looked at Victoria. "We should go." "Of course." Victoria stepped back, professional distance reasserting itself, but then she hesitated. "Daniel, are you free Thursday evening?" The question caught him off guard. Probably? Why?" "I'm cooking again. If you and Emma want to come over." The words came out rushed, slightly uncertain, and it made her seem younger suddenly. "No pressure. Just if you're interested." Daniel felt Emma's eyes boring into him from below. "We'd like that," he heard himself say. Victoria's smile was quick but genuine. 6:30? 6:30 works. "Ms. Hayes," the driver called again, more insistent. "Coming!" Victoria walked backward toward the car, her heels clicking on the pavement. "I'll see you Thursday." Then she was sliding into the back seat, phone already back to her ear, and the Mercedes pulled away into the morning traffic. Emma waited exactly 3 seconds before speaking. "Daddy, are you friends with the unicorn lady?" "I think so," Daniel said, surprising himself with the answer. "Good, I like her, even if she has to wear fancy clothes for work." They walked the last block to Emma's school, and Daniel tried not to think about the fact that Victoria had looked almost relieved when he'd said yes, like she'd been worried he might decline, like the invitation had cost her something to extend. The week crawled by with the particular slowness that comes from anticipation. Wednesday, Daniel worked a full shift and came home to find a note slipped under his door. "Looking forward to tomorrow. Do you or Emma have any food allergies I should know about?" V. The handwriting was elegant, each letter precisely formed. Daniel found himself staring at it longer than necessary before pulling out his phone to text her. He realized he didn't have her number. Instead, He wrote a note on the back of an envelope and slipped it under her door that evening. No allergies. Emma's not a fan of mushrooms, but she'll eat around them if necessary. See you tomorrow. Daniel. His handwriting looked clumsy next to hers. Thursday afternoon, Daniel left work an hour early, claiming a dentist appointment that didn't exist. His boss, Martinez, had given him a knowing look. You got a date, Carter? It's just dinner with a neighbor. Uh-huh. Just dinner. That's why you actually combed your hair today. Daniel had flipped him off good-naturedly and left before Martinez could say anything else. At home, he found Emma already changed out of her school clothes and into her favorite purple dress, the one with the twirly skirt that she insisted was fancy enough for the unicorn lady's house. You started getting ready without me? Daniel asked. Mrs. Chen helped. She says you need to wear your blue shirt, the one that makes your eyes nice. Did she now? Mrs. Chen appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. The boy has nice eyes. Should show them off. She was 73, blunt as a hammer, and had been Daniel's lifeline for the past 6 years. It's just dinner with a neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Mm-hmm. That's why Emma tells me you've been staring at the clock since Tuesday. She patted his cheek with surprising force. Blue shirt. And for heaven's sake, trim your beard. You look like a mountain man. 20 minutes later, Daniel stood in front of his bathroom mirror, beard trimmed, wearing the blue shirt, feeling ridiculous and nervous in equal measure. You look handsome, Daddy, Emma said from the doorway, pancake tucked under her arm. Thanks, sweetheart. Are you scared? Daniel knelt down to her level. A little? Is that weird? No, Miss Jennifer says it's okay to be scared of new things. It means they matter. Miss Jennifer is very wise. I know. That's why I listen to her. At 6:25, Daniel stood outside his apartment door, Emma beside him, both of them staring at the door across the hall like it might bite them. We could just stay home, Daniel said. Order pizza, watch a movie. Emma looked up at him with an expression of pure 6-year-old exasperation. Daddy, we can't. She's expecting us. And also, I want to see the fairy house again. Right, of course. At exactly 6:30, Daniel knocked. Victoria opened the door immediately, as if she'd been waiting on the other side. She wore jeans and a soft green sweater, her hair loose again, and Daniel caught that same floral scent from her perfume. Hi, she said, and there was something vulnerable in her expression. Come in. The apartment smelled amazing, garlic and herbs and something baking. Emma immediately gravitated toward the succulent collection, greeting each plant like an old friend, while Daniel followed Victoria into the kitchen area. I made lasagna, Victoria said, checking the oven, and salad and bread. I think I might have the same problem as last time where I make enough food for a small army. That's okay. We can help you eat through it. Victoria closed the oven and turned to face him. In the warm kitchen light, Daniel noticed the dark circles under her eyes were more pronounced than they'd been on Saturday. You look tired, he said, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, that came out wrong. I just meant, you're right. I am tired. Victoria leaned against the counter. The board meeting on Tuesday didn't go well. They want to expand faster than I think is sustainable. My CFO agrees with them. My head of operations agrees with me. Everyone's pulling in different directions, and I'm in the middle trying to hold it all together. That sounds exhausting. It is. Victoria rubbed her eyes. And the worst part is, I built this company. I should get to decide how fast it grows. But somewhere along the way, I took on investors, and now their voices matter as much as mine, maybe more. Daniel didn't know much about running a company, but he understood the feeling of losing control over something you'd built. Can you buy them out? Not without liquidating everything I own. And even then, Victoria shook her head. I'm sorry, you didn't come here to listen to me complain about work. I don't mind listening. Victoria met his eyes, and something passed between them. Understanding. The recognition of two people who spent most of their time being strong for others and rarely got to be honest about their own struggles. The oven timer beeped, breaking the moment. Over dinner, Emma kept up a steady stream of conversation, filling the space with stories about school and Pancake's latest adventures. Victoria listened and asked questions, but Daniel noticed her distraction, the way her eyes would drift to her phone on the counter, the slight tension in her shoulders. After Emma finished eating and asked permission to look at the books on Victoria's shelf, Daniel leaned forward. You okay? Victoria glanced toward Emma, then back to him. My ex has been calling. The statement hung in the air. Do you want to answer? Daniel asked. No, but he's persistent. Victoria's jaw tightened. He wants me to come back to California. Says the company would do better there, that I'm wasting my potential in Austin. What do you think? I think he's still trying to control my life from 800 miles away. Victoria's voice was quiet, but edged with steel. I think he never actually loved me. He loved what I could build, what I represented. A successful wife with her own company that made his success look even more impressive. Daniel thought about Emma's mother, the note she'd left. I can't do this. Not, I can't do this with you. Just, I can't do this. As if Emma and Daniel were obstacles to overcome rather than people she'd made commitments to. Some people see relationships as transactions, he said slowly. What can you give me? What can I take? How does this benefit me? They don't know how to see the other person as real. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. That's exactly it. How did you... Emma's mom. Daniel kept his voice low enough that Emma wouldn't hear from across the room. I spent years trying to figure out what I did wrong. Why I wasn't enough to make her stay. And then one day I realized it wasn't about me at all. She looked at Emma and saw a burden instead of a person. She looked at our life and saw what she was giving up instead of what she had. Do you still talk to her? No. She signed away her parental rights 2 years after she left. Made it official. Emma doesn't remember her at all. Victoria reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. Just a moment of contact, but it felt like more. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. We're better off. Emma has people who actually want to be in her life. Mrs. Chen treats her like a granddaughter. My buddy Marcus from the garage takes her for ice cream every Friday. She's loved. That's what matters. Still, you deserved better. So did you. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of shared understanding settling between them. Emma returned to the table, pancake in one hand and a book in the other. Victoria, can you read this? Daddy does the voices, but he makes the dragon sound funny. My dragon voice is excellent, thank you very much, Daniel protested. It sounds like you have a cold. Victoria laughed, the first real laugh Daniel had heard from her all evening. I'd be honored to read. Though I should warn you, my dragon voice probably isn't much better. They moved to the couch, Emma wedged between them, and Victoria read with the same attention she'd brought to dinner conversation. She did different voices for each character, even the dragon, which Emma declared way better than Daddy's. Halfway through this book, Victoria's phone buzzed on the coffee table. Daniel saw the name on the screen, Richard. Victoria saw it too. Her reading stuttered for a moment, but she kept going, finishing the page. When she set the book down to turn it, the phone buzzed again, and again. You can answer it, Daniel said quietly. I don't want to. Victoria, I don't want to. Her voice was firmer now. This is the first evening in weeks where I've felt like myself. Like a person instead of a CEO or an ex-wife or a disappointment to my investors. I'm reading a story about dragons to a 6-year-old, and it's the best thing I've done all week. I'm not letting Richard take that away. Emma looked up at her with wide eyes. Who's Richard? Someone who doesn't matter anymore, Victoria said, and picked up the book again. The phone buzzed twice more, then went silent. They finished the story, and Emma's eyes started to droop. Daniel glanced at the clock. 8:15, past her usual bedtime. We should go, he said, gently extracting himself from the couch. Already? Emma protested sleepily. Already. Some of us have school tomorrow. Victoria walked them to the door, and Daniel noticed how reluctant she seemed to let the evening end. At the threshold, Emma suddenly turned and wrapped her arms around Victoria's waist in an impulsive hug. Thank you for reading to me, she said, muffled against Victoria's sweater. Victoria looked startled for a moment, then her expression softened completely. She knelt down and hugged Emma properly. Thank you for listening, and for teaching me the correct way to do a dragon voice. You're welcome, Daddy needs more practice. I'm standing right here, Daniel said. After Emma released Victoria and headed across the hall, Daniel lingered in the doorway. Thank you for tonight, Victoria said. I needed this more than I realized. So did we. Daniel hesitated, then added, If your ex keeps bothering you, you can always come knock on our door. even if it's late, even if you just need to not be alone. Something flickered in Victoria's eyes. Gratitude, maybe. Or relief. That's a generous offer. We're neighbors. It's what neighbors do. Victoria smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm not sure I've ever had neighbors who actually meant that. Well, now you do. Daniel was halfway across the hall when Victoria called his name. He turned back. Saturday, she said. Are you working? Half day? Why? I was thinking, there's a farmer's market downtown. I've been meaning to go, but it feels strange going alone. If you and Emma wanted to come. Daniel thought about his Saturday routine, cleaning, errands, playground if Emma was restless. The same safe circuit he'd been running for years. What time? He asked. 9? We could get breakfast after. Emma will be thrilled. She loves farmers markets. Last time we went, she tried to convince me we needed to buy a live chicken. Victoria laughed. Did she succeed? Our landlord has feelings about livestock in apartments, so no, but she made a compelling argument. I look forward to hearing it. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Victoria. Inside his apartment, Daniel found Emma already in her pajamas, courtesy of her own capable 6-year-old hands. I like her, Daddy, Emma said, climbing into bed. I know you do, sweetheart. Do you like her? Daniel pulled the covers up to her chin, thinking about Victoria's tired eyes and genuine laugh and the way she'd hugged Emma like it mattered. Yeah, I do. Good. Because she needs friends. I can tell. How can you tell? Emma yawned, pancake tucked under her arm. She's got the same look you have sometimes. When you think I'm not watching, like you're lonely even when there's people around. Daniel's throat tightened. Sometimes Emma's perceptiveness was almost painful. Get some sleep, sweetheart. Daddy? Yeah? It's okay to have friends, even if they're grown-up lady friends. Miss Jennifer says grown-ups need friends too. I'll keep that in mind. After Emma fell asleep, Daniel stood at his kitchen window, looking across the narrow courtyard toward the building's other side. He couldn't see Victoria's windows from this angle, but he imagined her in her plant-filled apartment, probably still awake, probably still ignoring calls from her ex. His phone buzzed, a text from Martinez. How was the not a date? Daniel typed back. Still claiming it's just dinner with a neighbor. Sure it is. See you tomorrow, Romeo. Daniel set his phone down and realized he was smiling. Across the hall, Victoria sat at her dining table, the remains of dinner cleared away, her laptop open in front of her. Numbers filled the screen, projections, growth models, investor expectations. The board wanted a 20% increase in production. Her operations manager said they could maybe manage 10% without sacrificing quality. Victoria stared at the numbers until they blurred. Her phone lit up again. Richard's name. She swiped to decline without reading the message preview. Instead, she opened her photos and scrolled back to that lock screen picture, the one Daniel had accidentally seen. She studied her own face in the image, unguarded, peaceful, real. When had she last felt like that person? Tonight, she realized. Reading to Emma. Talking to Daniel about ex-partners and disappointment and the weight of other people's expectations. Laughing about dragon voices. Victoria closed her laptop without saving the spreadsheet. Tomorrow, she'd fight with the board and negotiate with her CFO and figure out how to grow the company without losing what made it matter in the first place. Tonight, she was just going to sit in her quiet apartment and remember what it felt like to be seen as a person instead of a corporation. Her phone buzzed one more time. She almost declined again, but the name on the screen made her pause. Mom. Victoria stared at it for a long moment before answering. Hi, Mom. Victoria. Her mother's voice was crisp, efficient. I've been trying to reach you all week. I've been busy. Too busy for your own mother? Victoria closed her eyes. What do you need, Mom? I ran into Richard at a fundraiser last night. He mentioned you've been avoiding his calls. Of course he had. Richard and I are divorced. I don't owe him phone calls. He's concerned about you. We all are. This move to Texas, this insistence on running the company from Austin instead of somewhere that makes sense, it makes sense to me. Victoria, her mother's tone sharpened. You're being childish. You have a responsibility to your investors, to your employees. You can't just run away because your marriage didn't work out. The words landed like slaps. "I'm not running away," Victoria said quietly. "I'm building a life that's actually mine. By hiding in some cheap apartment building in Austin? By ignoring calls from people who care about you?" "Richard doesn't care about me. He cares about controlling me. And you—" Victoria stopped herself, years of conditioning making her swallow the rest of the sentence, but her mother heard it anyway. "And I what?" "Nothing. Look, I have work to finish. I'll call you later." "Victoria Elizabeth Hayes, don't you dare!" Victoria ended the call. Her hands were shaking. She sat in the silence of her apartment, surrounded by plants and books and carefully curated peace, and felt the familiar weight of her family's expectations pressing down like a physical force. Her mother wanted her back in California, back in the life she'd left. Richard wanted her back under his influence. The board wanted her to grow faster, push harder, sacrifice more. Everyone wanted something from her, except Daniel. The thought rose unbidden. Daniel, who asked her honest questions and seemed genuinely interested in her answers, who didn't want her to be anyone other than who she was, who'd told her she could knock on his door at any time, even late, even if she just needed to not be alone. Victoria looked at the door to her apartment, then at the door across the hall. It was 9:30. Emma would be asleep. Daniel was probably getting ready for bed himself. She shouldn't bother him, but her apartment felt too quiet suddenly, too empty, the walls too close. Before she could talk herself out of it, Victoria grabbed her keys and crossed the hallway. She knocked softly, half hoping he wouldn't hear it, half terrified he wouldn't answer. The door opened almost immediately. Daniel stood there in sweatpants and a faded University of Texas t-shirt, his hair still damp from a shower. He looked surprised but not unwelcoming. "Hey," he said. "Everything okay?" Victoria realized she had no idea what to say. "I know it's late. Come in." Daniel stepped back without hesitation. "Emma's asleep, so we'll have to be quiet, but come in." Victoria stepped into his apartment, suddenly aware of how impulsive this was. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "My ex-wife called," Daniel said, closing the door. 3 months ago, first time in 5 years. Wanted to know if Emma looked like her." Victoria stared at him. "I spent 2 hours afterwards sitting in my kitchen wondering why I was shaking. It wasn't anger. It was just—" Daniel gestured vaguely. "Everything I'd built up, all the walls I'd put between that part of my life and this one, and one phone call brought it all back." "What did you do?" "I called Mrs. Chen. She came over at midnight with dumplings and tea and didn't ask any questions. Just sat with me until I stopped feeling like I was going to fall apart." Victoria felt something loosen in her chest. "My mother called, and before that my ex. They both think I'm being childish, running away, shirking my responsibilities." "Are you?" "No." The word came out fiercer than she intended. "I'm trying to live my life instead of the life everyone else designed for me. But sometimes—" Her voice cracked slightly. "Sometimes it's hard to remember why that matters." Daniel moved to the kitchen and started making tea without asking if she wanted any. The simple domesticity of it, the kettle filling, the mugs coming down from the cabinet, felt grounding. "When Emma's mom left," he said, pulling tea bags from a box, "everyone had opinions. My mom thought I should hire a full-time nanny. My friends thought I should put Emma in daycare and focus on finishing school. Emma's mom's parents thought I should let them raise her, that a single dad couldn't handle it alone. But you did anyway." "But I did anyway." Daniel poured hot water into the mugs. "And some days it's been impossible. Some days I've been so tired I could barely stand. Some days I've made every wrong choice and fed her cereal for dinner and let her watch too much TV because I just couldn't do one more thing." He handed Victoria a mug. "But she's mine. My daughter, my life, my choice. And I'd rather fail at something that's authentically mine than succeed at something someone else wanted for me." Victoria wrapped her hands around the warm mug, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "How do you do it? Handle the pressure, the doubt?" "I don't most days. I just keep moving forward and hope I'm doing more right than wrong." Daniel leaned against the counter, "But it helps to have people who see you as a person instead of a project." They stood in the small kitchen, drinking tea, and Victoria felt the tightness in her chest finally begin to ease. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for letting me barge in here." "You're not barging. You're being a neighbor." Daniel smiled slightly. That's what neighbors do, remember? Victoria laughed, watery but genuine. I'm going to hold you to that. I hope you do. They finished their tea in comfortable silence, and when Victoria finally said goodnight and crossed back to her own apartment, she felt lighter somehow, less alone. Daniel stood in his doorway and watched her disappear inside, then closed his own door and leaned against it. Mrs. Chen had been right, of course, about the blue shirt and the nice eyes and the fact that this was becoming more than just dinner with a neighbor. But for once, Daniel didn't feel the need to overthink it. Some things were worth the risk of being vulnerable again. Some people were worth stepping outside the safe boundaries he'd built. And maybe, just maybe, Victoria Hayes was both. Saturday morning came with the kind of clear, bright sunshine that made everything feel possible. Daniel woke before his alarm, which almost never happened, and lay in bed listening to Emma's soft breathing from her room and the distant sounds of the city waking up. He felt different, lighter somehow, like something had shifted in the architecture of his carefully ordered life. By 8:30, Emma was dressed in her favorite overalls and insisting that Pancake needed to come to the farmer's market because he's never seen one before and it's important for his education. Pancake is a stuffed rabbit, Daniel pointed out, pouring cereal into bowls. That doesn't mean he shouldn't learn things, Daddy. There was no arguing with that logic. At 8:55, Daniel stood in front of his bathroom mirror one more time, second-guessing his outfit choice. Just jeans and a gray Henley, nothing fancy, but he'd changed shirts 3 times already and felt ridiculous about it. You look nice, Emma said from the doorway, Pancake under her arm. Stop worrying. I'm not worrying. You have your worry face on, the one where your eyebrows do the thing. Daniel looked at his daughter, who at 6 years old could apparently read him better than he could read himself. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart, Daddy. You just notice more now. At exactly 9 o'clock, Victoria knocked on their door. She wore white jeans and a loose blue linen shirt, her hair in a ponytail, sunglasses pushed up on her head. No makeup that Daniel could see, and she looked younger without the corporate armor. More like the woman in that lock screen photo. Morning, she said, smiling at Emma. I see Pancake made the cut. He needs to learn about vegetables, Emma explained seriously. He thinks they all taste bad because that's what Daddy says. I do not say that. You make a face when you eat broccoli. Everyone makes a face when they eat broccoli. Victoria laughed and the sound filled the hallway. Should we get going before this becomes a full vegetable debate? They took Victoria's car, a silver Audi that was nice but not ostentatious. Emma was delighted by the heated seats, declaring them like sitting on a warm pillow, and spent the drive downtown explaining Pancake's complete backstory to Victoria, who listened with the same attention she'd give a board presentation. The farmer's market sprawled across Republic Square, vendors setting up colorful stalls selling everything from organic vegetables to handmade soap to fresh-cut flowers. The smell of coffee and pastries drifted from a food truck parked at the corner, and a blues guitarist played near the fountain. Emma immediately spotted a booth selling handmade stuffed animals and dragged Victoria over to see them. Daniel followed, watching Victoria crouch down to Emma's level as his daughter explained the hierarchy of stuffed animals and why Pancake was superior to all others. The vendor, an older woman with kind eyes, smiled at them like they were a family. The assumption should have made Daniel uncomfortable. Instead, it just felt natural. They wandered through the market, Victoria buying heirloom tomatoes and fresh basil, while Emma collected samples from generous vendors. Daniel found himself relaxed in a way he hadn't been in months, maybe years. There was no agenda here, no schedule to keep, just sunshine and fresh air, and 2 people he was starting to care about more than he probably should. I haven't done this in forever, Victoria said, examining a bunch of sunflowers. Just wandered around without checking my phone every 5 minutes. Daniel glanced at her pocket. You left it in the car, didn't you? Deliberately, my CFO will have a heart attack, but I needed a morning where no one could reach me with emergencies that aren't actually emergencies. Good for you. Victoria bought the sunflowers, and Emma insisted they get some for Pancake's room, which was really just Emma's room, but apparently Pancake had territorial claims. They continued through the market, and Daniel noticed how people looked at Victoria differently here. Without the suit and the corporate persona, she was just another woman buying vegetables and flowers on a Saturday morning. You seem more relaxed, Daniel observed as they stood in line for coffee. I feel more relaxed. It's amazing what happens when you're not constantly performing. Victoria shifted her canvas bag of vegetables to her other shoulder. In California, I couldn't go anywhere without running into someone from the industry. Every coffee shop, every grocery store, every restaurant, someone always wanted to pitch me something or network or ask about the company. It was exhausting. Is that why you moved here? To escape that? Partly. But also because I needed to remember who I was before I became Victoria Hayes, CEO. Before the company. Before the marriage. Before all the expectations. She paused as they reached the front of the line. I needed to find out if that person still existed. And does she? Victoria looked at him, something vulnerable in her expression. I'm starting to think maybe she does. They ordered coffee and found a bench near the fountain where they could watch Emma feed pieces of her muffin to a brave group of sparrows. The guitarist had switched to an old Stevie Ray Vaughan song, and the market buzzed with the pleasant chaos of a Saturday morning. Can I ask you something? Victoria said, watching Emma with the birds. Sure. Why haven't you dated? In all the years since Emma's mom left? The question was direct but not invasive, just curious. Daniel thought about how to answer. At first I was too angry, then too tired, then too busy, and after a while it just seemed easier to focus on Emma and not complicate things. He took a sip of his coffee. Plus, dating as a single dad is complicated. You have to find someone who's okay with the package deal. Someone who understands that Emma comes first, always. That's a big ask. It shouldn't be. That's just being a good parent. You'd think so. But I've had women tell me directly that they don't want to deal with someone else's kid. One of them actually said Emma was baggage. Daniel's jaw tightened at the memory. After that, I just stopped trying. Victoria's expression hardened. People can be remarkably cruel in their honesty. What about you? Have you dated since the divorce? No. I've been too busy rebuilding my life to think about adding someone else to it. Victoria watched Emma, who was now trying to teach the sparrows to eat from her hand. And honestly, after Richard, I'm not sure I trust my judgment anymore. I spent 6 years with someone who saw me as a trophy wife with a convenient side business. How did I not see that? How did I think that was love? Because you wanted it to be, Daniel said quietly. Because it's easier to believe the story you're told than to admit you're living a lie. Victoria turned to look at him. You're more insightful than you give yourself credit for. I've had a lot of time to think. Not much else to do at 2 in the morning when you can't sleep. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Emma and the birds and the flow of people through the market. The guitarist finished his song and started another one, something slower and more melancholy. I got an offer yesterday, Victoria said suddenly. A buyout offer. From a larger wellness company. They want to acquire us, keep me on as a figurehead CEO for 2 years, then transition me out. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. That's what you want? No, but it would solve a lot of problems. The board would be happy. My investors would make a fortune. I'd never have to worry about money again. Victoria's voice was carefully neutral. My CFO thinks I should take it, says I'd be crazy not to. What do you think? I think I'd be selling the thing I built with my own hands to people who'll strip it for parts and spit out some corporate version that has nothing to do with why I started the company in the first place. Victoria's hands tightened around her coffee cup. But I also think I'm tired. Tired of fighting with the board. Tired of defending every decision. Tired of being told I'm not thinking big enough or moving fast enough or sacrificing enough. Daniel heard the exhaustion in her voice, the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been holding up the world for too long. When do you have to decide? He asked. They want an answer by the end of the month. 3 weeks. Emma ran over, breathless and grinning. Daddy, did you see? The birds ate from my hand. Well, one bird, but still. I saw, sweetheart. That was very brave of you. Can we get flowers for our apartment too? Pancake says we need more color. Pancake has opinions about interior decorating now. He's very artistic. They bought flowers, bright gerbera daisies that Emma insisted would make the kitchen happy, and continued browsing. Daniel found himself hyper-aware of Victoria beside him, the way people made space for her in crowds, the way vendors smiled at her genuine interest in their products. At a booth selling handmade pottery, Emma became fixated on a small blue vase. It's perfect for Pancake's flowers, she declared. The vendor, a young man with clay-stained hands, quoted a price that made Daniel wince internally. It wasn't unreasonable for handmade work, but it was more than he'd planned to spend. "Emma, that's a bit expensive," he started. Victoria was already pulling out her wallet. "We'll take it." "Victoria, you don't have to." "I want to." She handed the vendor her card, then crouched down to Emma's level. "Consider it a gift for Pancake, for being such a good student at his first farmer's market." Emma's face lit up. "Thank you. Pancake says you're his favorite person now, after Daddy and me." "I'm honored to be third on Pancake's list." As they walked away, Daniel pulled Victoria aside while Emma skipped ahead with her wrapped vase. "You didn't need to do that," he said quietly. "I know, but I wanted to. Is that okay?" Daniel looked at her and saw genuine uncertainty in her expression, as if she was worried she'd overstepped. "It's okay," he said. "Thank you. She'll treasure it." "Good, because honestly, I haven't bought something just because it made someone happy in a very long time. It felt nice." They grabbed breakfast at a small cafe near the market, settling into a corner booth while Emma colored on the paper menu with crayons the waitress provided. Victoria ordered the vegetable scramble, Daniel got pancakes to share with Emma, and for 45 minutes they existed in a bubble separate from the rest of the world. The conversation flowed easily, Victoria telling stories about disastrous early days of her company, Daniel sharing memories of Emma's toddler years, and the various catastrophes that came with raising a small human alone. Emma interjected with her own observations and questions, and the waitress who refilled their coffee smiled at them like they were exactly what they appeared to be, a family enjoying Saturday breakfast. It was nearly noon when they finally made it back to Victoria's car, arms full of flowers and vegetables and Emma's treasured vase. "That was the best morning," Emma announced from the back seat as they drove home. "Can we do it again next week?" Victoria glanced at Daniel. "I'd like that. If your dad's okay with it." "I'm okay with it," Daniel said, and meant it. Back at the building, they carried everything upstairs. Mrs. Chen was in the hallway, returning from her own shopping, and she took one look at the three of them laden with market finds and smiled knowingly. "Good morning?" she asked. "Very good morning," Emma said. "We got flowers, and I fed birds, and Pancake got a vase." "Sounds eventful." Mrs. Chen's eyes moved between Daniel and Victoria with obvious approval. "Daniel, when you have a moment, I need help with my kitchen sink again." "I'll come by this afternoon," Daniel promised. Inside Victoria's apartment, they unloaded the vegetables while Emma carefully arranged her flowers in the new vase. Victoria moved around her kitchen with easy efficiency, putting things away, and Daniel found himself watching her more than helping. "What?" she asked, catching him staring. "Nothing. You just seem different than you did on Thursday. Lighter." "I feel lighter. Turns out leaving your phone in the car for 3 hours is remarkably therapeutic." Victoria paused, a bunch of basil in her hands. "I keep waiting for the anxiety to kick in. The need to check messages, make sure nothing's on fire at the company, but it hasn't, and that's either really healthy or really concerning." "Maybe it's just healthy." "Maybe." Victoria put the basil in water. "I was thinking, if you're not busy tomorrow, I could use help with something." "What kind of something?" "I have all these pictures I bought when I moved here, but they're still in boxes because I can't reach the high spots and I'm terrible with a drill. And before you offer to just do it for me, I'd actually like to learn how. So maybe you could teach me." Daniel smiled. "You want to learn how to hang pictures?" "I want to learn how to make this place feel like mine. Like I'm actually planning to stay, not just camping out temporarily." Victoria met his eyes. "Does that make sense?" "Complete sense. Tomorrow works. I'll bring my drill." Emma appeared with Pancake and the newly arranged flowers. "Victoria, do you want to see Pancake's room?" "I would love to see Pancake's room." Daniel watched his daughter lead Victoria across the hall to their apartment, chattering about Pancake's preferences for where the vase should go, and felt something warm expand in his chest. This was dangerous territory. He knew that. Opening up his carefully controlled life to someone new, letting Emma get attached, letting himself get attached. But watching Victoria crouch down to examine Pancake's corner of Emma's room with complete seriousness, asking thoughtful questions about the rabbit's decorating philosophy, Daniel couldn't bring himself to care about the danger. Some risks were worth taking. Later that evening, after Emma was asleep and Daniel had fixed Mrs. Chen's sink and was settling into his regular Saturday night routine of laundry and meal prep, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Victoria. Got your number from Mrs. Chen. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to say thank you for this morning. I haven't felt that normal in a very long time." Daniel saved her number and typed back, "Normal is underrated. We should do it again. Next Saturday?" It's a date. Daniel sent it before he could overthink the word choice, then immediately worried he'd been too forward. But Victoria's response came quickly. "It is." Daniel set his phone down and found himself grinning at his laundry basket like an idiot. Across the hall, Victoria sat on her couch with a cup of tea, her laptop open to the buyout offer she was supposed to be reviewing. The numbers were good. Better than good. She could accept. Walk away wealthy and free, start something new without the weight of investor expectations and board meetings. But instead of reading the contract, she was looking at the sunflowers Emma had picked out, now sitting on her coffee table in a mason jar. Her phone buzzed. Richard again. She declined the call without hesitation. Then she opened a new message to her CFO. "Need to talk Monday morning. I'm thinking about the offer." The response came immediately. "Finally seeing reason. This is the right move, Victoria." But Victoria wasn't sure what the right move was anymore. 3 weeks ago, she would have known. 3 weeks ago, she had a clear vision of what she wanted her life to look like. Now, sitting in her quiet apartment with farmers market flowers and the memory of Daniel's smile and Emma's laughter, Victoria wasn't sure of anything except that the life she'd been living felt increasingly wrong. She closed her laptop without reading the offer and went to bed early, falling asleep to the distant sound of Daniel moving around his apartment across the hall. Sunday afternoon, Daniel showed up at Victoria's door with his drill, a level, and Emma in tow because she'd insisted that Pancake needs to supervise. Victoria had moved furniture to access the walls, and boxes of framed pictures sat stacked in the corner. She changed into old jeans and a paint-stained t-shirt that suggested she owned clothes that weren't carefully curated. "Okay," Daniel said, setting down his toolbox. "First lesson in picture hanging. It's 70% measuring and 30% hoping you don't hit a stud in the wrong place." "Encouraging." "I'm here to be helpful, not encouraging." They started with the living room wall, Victoria learning how to use the stud finder while Emma provided running commentary via Pancake. "Pancake says you should put that one higher," Emma declared, pointing to a black and white photograph of a bridge. "Pancake has strong opinions about wall placement," Victoria observed. "He's very visual." Daniel showed Victoria how to mark the wall, how to drill pilot holes, how to use anchors for drywall. She was a quick study, asking smart questions and not afraid to try things herself. "You're good at this," Daniel said, watching her hang a large abstract painting with minimal help. "I'm good at following instructions. There's a difference." "No, you're good at this. You have a natural sense of spacing and balance." Victoria stepped back to examine her work, head tilted. "My ex used to hire people for everything, hanging pictures, assembling furniture, anything that required tools. He said it was more efficient. What do you think?" "I think he was wrong about a lot of things, including efficiency." Victoria picked up the drill again. "What's next?" They worked through the afternoon, Emma playing quietly in the corner with her toys, Pancake offering occasional guidance. The apartment slowly transformed as pictures went up, a series of botanical prints in the hallway, abstract pieces in the living room, a beautiful photograph of mountains at sunset over the couch. "Where's this from?" Daniel asked, studying the mountain photograph. "Colorado. I took it during a solo road trip 5 years ago." Victoria's voice went soft. "I'd been fighting with Richard about expanding the company. He wanted to take on more investors. I wasn't sure. So I left for a week and just drove. No plan, no schedule, no phone calls." "Did it help?" "I came back and took the investors. Made Richard happy, grew the company like everyone wanted." Victoria stared at the photograph. "But I've always wondered what would have happened if I'd listened to my gut instead." "What was your gut saying?" "That some things should stay small and beautiful instead of becoming big and complicated." Daniel thought about his own life, the engineering degree he'd never finished, the dreams he'd set aside, the small, complicated life he'd built with Emma that was nothing like what he'd once imagined. "Small and beautiful isn't a failure," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's actually the point." Victoria looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. Understanding, maybe, or recognition of a kindred spirit. They hung the last picture, a simple line drawing of a woman's profile, in Victoria's bedroom. It was the most personal room Daniel had seen. Books stacked on the nightstand, plants on the windowsill, a cozy reading chair in the corner. "This one was my grandmother's," Victoria said, holding the frame carefully. She was an artist. Never successful, never sold anything, but she painted every single day of her adult life because it made her happy. Sounds like she had her priorities right. My mother used to say Grandma wasted her talent, that she should have pursued gallery shows and marketing and making a name for herself. Victoria's hands tightened on the frame. But Grandma just laughed and said some things weren't meant to be commodified. Daniel helped her hang the drawing above the bed, and they stood back to admire it. "She sounds like a wise woman," he said. "She was. She's also the only person in my family who told me not to marry Richard." Victoria smiled sadly. She died 6 months after the wedding. But before she did, she pulled me aside and said, "You can still change your mind, you know. It's not too late to choose differently." "But you didn't." "No, I was too invested in the narrative." The successful power couple, both building empires, perfect on paper. Victoria touched the edge of the frame gently. "Grandma knew. She always knew when I was lying to myself." From the living room, Emma called out, "Daddy, Pancake is hungry." Daniel checked his watch. Nearly 5. "We should go. I need to start dinner." Victoria walked them to the door, surveying her newly decorated apartment. "Thank you for this, for teaching me instead of just doing it for me. Anytime you want to learn something new, I'm happy to teach. Careful. I might take you up on that." "I hope you do." They stood in the doorway, that same charged moment from other evenings, the space between them feeling loaded with possibility. Emma broke the spell by tugging on Daniel's hand. "Daddy, can Victoria have dinner with us? We're making spaghetti, and she likes spaghetti." Daniel looked at Victoria. "No pressure, but if you want to—" "I'd love to," Victoria said quickly. "Give me 5 minutes to change?" "You don't have to change. I have paint on my shirt and I smell like drywall dust." 5 minutes. She disappeared into her apartment, and Emma grinned up at Daniel. "What?" he asked. "You like her, like really like her." "Emma? It's okay, Daddy. I like her too. And Pancake approves." "Well, if Pancake approves, then I guess it's settled." Victoria reappeared in clean jeans and a soft sweater, her hair pulled back, and they crossed the hall together. In Daniel's kitchen, they fell into an easy rhythm, Victoria chopping vegetables while Daniel boiled water, Emma setting the table with careful precision. "This is nice," Victoria said, stirring sauce. "Cooking with other people. I forgot how nice it is." "You cook alone a lot?" "Always. It's one of the things I miss about being married. Not Richard specifically, just having someone there while you prepare a meal, the casual conversation, the shared task." "Emma and I cook together all the time," Daniel said. "Though mostly she supervises and I do the actual work." "I do help," Emma protested. "I'm an excellent stirrer." "You are an excellent stirrer," Victoria agreed. "Top tier." Over dinner, Emma told Victoria about her week at school, and Victoria shared a carefully edited version of her own work week. Daniel watched them interact and felt something settle inside him, something that had been restless and uncertain for years. This was what he'd been missing. Not romance specifically, but connection. The feeling of building something with another person instead of just existing in parallel. After dinner, they played a board game that Emma picked, something involving colorful cards and rules that changed every round. Victoria got competitive in a way that delighted Emma, and they formed an alliance against Daniel that was transparently unfair. "This is rigged," Daniel complained as they won for the 3rd time. "It's called strategy, Daddy," Emma said primly. At 8:30, Emma started yawning, and Victoria took that as her cue to leave. But at the door, she hesitated. "I have a confession," she said quietly, after Emma had gone to brush her teeth. "Okay, see, I'm meeting with my CFO tomorrow morning about the buyout offer, and I don't know what I'm going to say." Daniel studied her face. "What do you want to say?" "That's the problem. Part of me wants to take it, walk away, start fresh with something smaller and more manageable, something that's actually mine." Victoria's voice dropped. But another part of me feels like that would be giving up, admitting I can't handle what I built. Those are two very different things, Daniel said. Choosing to walk away isn't the same as failing, isn't it? No. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit that what you built isn't serving you anymore, that it's okay to want something different. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. How'd you get so wise? Years of making mistakes and learning from them. Usually the hard way. She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. I keep thinking about what my grandmother would say. About what's worth commodifying and what should just be allowed to exist. What do you think she'd say about this? I think she'd ask me if I still love it, the company, the work, all of it. If I still feel the same fire I felt when I started. Victoria's eyes glistened. And honestly, Daniel, I don't know if I do anymore. Daniel wanted to reach out to offer comfort, but he wasn't sure if that was appropriate. Instead, he just said, "Then maybe that's your answer." Maybe. Victoria wiped at her eyes quickly. Sorry, I don't usually fall apart on people. You're not falling apart. You're being honest. There's a difference. Emma emerged from the bathroom, ready for bed, and hugged Victoria goodnight. After Victoria left, Emma looked up at Daniel with those two perceptive eyes. She's sad, Emma observed. Yes, sweetheart, she is. Because of her work? Because she has to make a hard decision. Emma considered this. Miss Jennifer says hard decisions are just picking between two things you want. Easy decisions are picking between something you want and something you don't want. Miss Jennifer is very wise. I know. That's why she's my favorite teacher. After Emma was in bed, Daniel stood at his kitchen window looking out at the night. His phone buzzed. Victoria. Thank you for listening and for not telling me what to do. Daniel. Not my place to tell you what to do. But for what it's worth, I think you already know what you want. You're just scared to admit it. Victoria. You're right. I am scared. Daniel. That's okay. Being scared means it matters. Victoria. Did Miss Jennifer teach you that? Daniel. My daughter has an excellent teacher. There was a pause, then. Whatever I decide, I'm glad I met you, both of you. You've reminded me what it feels like to be a person instead of a position. Daniel stared at the message for a long time before responding. Same here. Sleep well, Victoria. Good night, Daniel. Across the hall, Victoria sat with her laptop open to the buyout offer one more time. The numbers were still good. The deal was still sound. Everything about it made logical, financial, professional sense. But logic and sense weren't the same as right. She thought about her grandmother painting in her studio every day, not for galleries or recognition, but because it made her soul sing. She thought about Daniel, who'd given up engineering dreams to raise his daughter and didn't seem to regret it for a second. She thought about Emma, who believed in Pancake's opinions and fed birds by hand and saw the world with uncomplicated joy. She thought about the past 3 weeks. The farmer's market and picture hanging and cooking dinner in someone else's kitchen. The feeling of being seen as Victoria instead of Victoria Hayes, CEO. She closed her laptop without saving any changes to the contract. Tomorrow, she'd meet with her CFO and tell him what she'd decided. Tonight, she'd sleep in her newly decorated apartment and dream about what it might feel like to choose small and beautiful over big and complicated. The building settled into nighttime quiet. 2 neighbors in their separate apartments, both lying awake thinking about choices and possibilities and the strange courage it took to admit when something needed to change. Monday morning arrived with rain, the kind of steady downpour that turned Austin's streets into rivers and made getting anywhere on time nearly impossible. Daniel dropped Emma at school 20 minutes late, her backpack soaked despite the umbrella, and arrived at the garage to find Martinez already 3 cars deep into the day's work. Rough morning? Martinez asked, looking up from under the hood of a Toyota. You could say that. Daniel grabbed his coveralls from the hook, trying not to think about Victoria's meeting with her CFO, trying not to wonder what she'd decided. It wasn't his business. They were neighbors. Friends, maybe. Nothing more. But he checked his phone 3 times before lunch anyway. Across town, Victoria sat in a glass-walled conference room at her company's downtown office, watching her CFO pace back and forth like a caged animal. You're making a mistake, Robert said for the 4th time. A massive, potentially catastrophic mistake. I'm aware of your opinion, Victoria replied calmly, though her hands were clenched in her lap beneath the table. But it's my company, Robert. My decision. It's the investors' company, too. They have a say in this. And I'm exercising my rights as majority shareholder to decline the offer. Robert stopped pacing and planted his hands on the conference table. Victoria, be reasonable. This is $40 million? $40 million. You could retire tomorrow. Start something new. Do whatever you want without the pressure of keeping this place running. I don't want to retire. And I don't want to sell something I built to people who'll turn it into just another corporate wellness brand that doesn't actually care about wellness. That's naive. No, Robert, it's principled. There's a difference. Robert's expression shifted from frustration to something almost pitying. This is about him, isn't it? The divorce. You're making an emotional decision because Richard hurt you, and now you're trying to prove something. Victoria stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. This has nothing to do with Richard. This is about me remembering why I started this company in the first place, about not letting growth for growth's sake destroy what actually matters. And what matters, Victoria? Really? Because from where I'm standing, you're about to tank your own company out of some misplaced sense of idealism. What matters is that when I look at my life, I can actually recognize it as mine. Not some corporate entity that has my name on it, but my soul missing from it. Victoria's voice was steady now, certain. I'm not selling, Robert, and if you can't support that decision, then maybe we need to have a different conversation about your role here. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Robert gathered his papers slowly, his jaw tight. I'll stay, but I'm putting my objections in writing for the board. They deserve to know that I advised against this. Noted. After Robert left, Victoria stood alone in the conference room, looking out at the rain-soaked city. Her phone buzzed with messages, the acquisition company wanting a response, board members texting questions, her assistant asking about rescheduled meetings. She ignored all of them and texted Daniel instead. I said no. The response came quickly. How do you feel? Victoria thought about it, terrified, but also like I can breathe for the first time in months. That sounds about right. Did you just compare major business decisions to breathing? I compared choosing what's right for you to breathing. Slightly different. Victoria smiled at her phone, and for the first time all morning, the knot in her chest loosened slightly. Dinner tonight? I could use some normalcy. Emma has dance class until 6. Come over after. I'll make something. You don't have to cook for me. I know. I want to. Victoria pocketed her phone and walked out of the conference room, through the open-plan office where her employees worked at standing desks, surrounded by the very products the company sold. Essential oil diffusers, meditation app subscriptions, organic supplements in sleek packaging. She'd built this. Every piece of it, from the logo design to the company culture to the partnerships with meditation teachers and nutritionists. And she'd almost sold it because everyone else thought she should. Her assistant Maya looked up from her desk. How did the meeting go? I declined the offer. Maya's eyes widened. Seriously? Seriously. Robert looked like he wanted to throw something when he left. Robert will survive. He's just disappointed I didn't prioritize his bonus over my principles. Maya grinned. Good for you. For what it's worth, everyone here was worried about the acquisition. Nobody wanted to work for some faceless corporation. Victoria hadn't considered that. She'd been so focused on the financial and strategic implications that she'd forgotten the acquisition would affect the 127 people who worked for her. People with families and mortgages and lives built around the jobs she'd created. Thanks for telling me that, she said quietly. The rest of the day passed in a blur of damage control. Victoria called each board member personally to explain her decision, enduring various degrees of disappointment and frustration. 2 of them threatened to sell their shares. 1 accused her of letting personal issues cloud her judgment. By 5 o'clock, Victoria was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. She drove home through the rain, her expensive car navigating streets that looked nothing like the California road she'd left behind. Austin was messier, less polished, more real somehow. The kind of city where a farmer's market could take over a public square and nobody minded the disruption. At the apartment building, she sat in her car for a moment, watching rain stream down the windshield. Her phone buzzed with another message from her mother. Robert called me, said you're being irrational. Victoria, what are you thinking? Victoria deleted the message without responding. Inside her apartment, she changed into dry clothes and stood in her living room looking at the pictures Daniel had helped her hang. Her grandmother's drawing, the Colorado mountains, the botanical prints. This was hers. This space, this life, this choice. Her phone rang. Richard. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up, some need to finally put this ghost to rest. What do you want, Richard? I heard about the acquisition offer. His voice was smooth, confident. I also heard you turned it down. News travels fast. It was a stupid move, Victoria. That kind of money doesn't come around twice. I didn't ask for your opinion. No, you never do. That's always been your problem. You think you know better than everyone else. Victoria felt anger rise hot in her throat. My problem? My problem was spending 6 years married to someone who saw me as an accessory, someone who wanted the idea of a successful wife but couldn't handle the reality of a partner with her own ambitions. That's not fair. Isn't it? You pitched a fit every time I had to work late. Every time I chose a business trip over one of your networking dinners. You said you supported my career, but what you actually wanted was for me to be successful enough to make you look good, but not so successful that I didn't have time to make you the center of my universe. Richard's silence told her she'd hit the mark. I'm not coming back to California, Victoria continued, her voice steady now. I'm not selling my company, and I'm not interested in your opinions about my life. We're done, Richard. We've been done for 2 years. It's time you accepted that. You're going to regret this. Maybe, but at least it'll be my regret, not yours. She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline coursing through her system, but beneath the trembling was something else. Relief. The bone-deep relief of finally saying what she should have said years ago. At 6:30, she knocked on Daniel's door. He opened it wearing jeans and a faded Austin FC t-shirt, his hair damp from a shower. The apartment smelled like garlic and onions, and Victoria could see Emma at the kitchen table, still in her dance leotard, drawing with markers. Hi, Daniel said, and something in his expression suggested he knew she'd had a rough day. Hi. Victoria felt suddenly uncertain. I know I said I was coming over, but if this is a bad time, it's not a bad time. Come in. Daniel stepped aside, and Victoria entered the warm chaos of their apartment. Emma's dance bag spilled out in the corner, pancakes sitting on top like a guardian. Coloring books scattered across the coffee table. A stack of clean laundry waiting to be folded on the couch. It was messy, and lived in, and real, and Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. Hey, Daniel said softly, closing the door. You okay? I don't know. Victoria's voice cracked. I turned down the acquisition. I told my CFO to deal with it. I hung up on my ex-husband, and I think I might have just made the biggest mistake of my professional life. But I can't seem to care because for the first time in years, I feel like I'm actually living instead of just managing. Emma appeared at Victoria's side, looking up at her with concerned eyes. Are you sad? I'm a lot of things right now, sweetie. Sad is probably on the list. Pancake says hugs help with sad. Emma wrapped her small arms around Victoria's waist. Victoria hugged her back and something in her chest broke open. She started crying, not the polite tears of someone trying to maintain composure, but real sobs that came from somewhere deep and long suppressed. Daniel guided her to the couch, and she sat there crying while Emma patted her arm, and Daniel disappeared into the kitchen. He returned with a glass of water and a box of tissues, setting them on the coffee table without saying anything. After a few minutes, the tears slowed. Victoria wiped her eyes, aware that her makeup was probably destroyed and not caring even a little bit. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to fall apart on you. Don't apologize. You've been holding that in for a while, I think. Years, probably. Victoria took a shaky breath. I talked to Richard, told him to stop calling, stop having opinions about my life. It felt good and awful at the same time. That's normal. Ending things that needed to end usually feels like that. Emma climbed onto the couch beside Victoria, pancake in hand. My mommy left us when I was a baby. Daddy says she made a choice and it's not our fault. Victoria looked at Daniel, who nodded slightly. Your daddy's right, Victoria said to Emma. Sometimes people make choices that hurt us, but that doesn't mean we did anything wrong. Do you have a mommy who makes you sad? I have a mother who wants me to be someone I'm not, which is different but also makes me sad sometimes. Emma considered this seriously. That's hard. Pancake thinks parents should love their kids how they are, not how they want them to be. Pancake is very wise. I know, that's why I listened to him. Daniel caught Victoria's eye over Emma's head and they shared a smile. Over dinner, chicken stir-fry that Daniel had somehow made taste restaurant quality, Emma told Victoria about her dance class and the recital they were practicing for. Victoria listened and asked questions, grateful for the distraction from her own spiraling thoughts. After dinner, Emma wanted to show Victoria her latest drawings, and they sat on the floor while Emma narrated each picture's story with elaborate detail. Daniel cleaned up the kitchen, and Victoria felt herself slowly settling, the anxiety of the day easing into something more manageable. At 8, Emma started yawning, and Daniel intervened. "Bedtime, sweetheart." "But Victoria's here, and Victoria will still be here tomorrow. Say goodnight." Emma hugged Victoria again, then whispered conspiratorially, "Daddy likes you a lot. He smiles different when you're here." Before Victoria could respond, Emma skipped off to her bedroom, leaving Victoria and Daniel alone. "Sorry about that," Daniel said, though he didn't look particularly sorry. "She has no filter. Don't apologize, it's sweet." Victoria stood, suddenly aware of how domestic this all was. How easy it would be to fall into this pattern, to let this become something more than friendship, and how terrifying that possibility was. "I should go," she said. "You probably have a million things to do. Just the usual bedtime routine, but if you want to stay, you're welcome to. I can make tea after I get Emma settled." Victoria looked at him, this man who'd let her cry on his couch, and fed her dinner and didn't ask for anything in return. This man who raised his daughter alone and fixed cars, and had given up his dreams without bitterness. "I'd like that," she said. Daniel smiled. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll be back in 20 minutes. While Daniel handled bedtime, Victoria wandered around the small living room, looking at the evidence of their lives. Pictures of Emma at various ages on the walls. A shelf of books that ranged from auto repair manuals to children's stories. A jar of coins on the counter labeled Emma's college fund in Daniel's handwriting. It was so different from the life she'd been living. No pretense, no performance, just a man trying to build a good life for his daughter with what he had. Daniel returned 15 minutes later, Emma successfully in bed, and made tea while Victoria settled on the couch. "How are you really?" he asked, handing her a mug and sitting in the armchair across from her. "Honestly, I don't know. Part of me feels like I just made the best decision of my life. Another part thinks I'm an idiot who just turned down $40 million out of pride. What does your gut say?" Victoria thought about her grandmother, painting in her studio, about that Colorado road trip where she'd felt most like herself, about the past month in Austin, slowly building a life that felt authentic instead of aspirational. "My gut says I did the right thing, but my gut has been wrong before. Has it? Or have you just been ignoring it so long that you forgot what it sounds like?" The question landed hard. "You do that a lot," Victoria said. "Ask questions that make me reconsider everything." "Sorry." "Don't be. I need it." She took a sip of tea. "After I hung up on Richard today, I realized something. I've spent the last 10 years of my life making decisions based on what other people expected. What would make my parents proud? What would impress investors? What would prove to my ex-husband that I was successful enough to be worth his time? I've been performing this version of success that looks good from the outside but feels empty from the inside. And now? Now I have no idea what I'm doing, but at least it's authentically my confusion instead of someone else's prescribed path." Daniel laughed. "I'll drink to that." He raised his tea mug, and Victoria clinked hers against it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Victoria felt something shift in the air between them. An awareness that had been building for weeks, maybe since that first night when she'd knocked on his door looking for her phone. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said. "Sure." "What made you say yes when I invited you and Emma to dinner that first time?" Daniel thought about it. "Honestly, you looked like you needed someone to see you as a person instead of a position, and I knew what that felt like. Being invisible? Being reduced to a role? Single dad? Auto mechanic? The guy who gave up his dreams? After a while, you start to wonder if there's anything left of you beyond the labels. Is there?" Daniel met her eyes. I'm starting to remember that there is, because of you. The admission hung in the air between them, vulnerable and honest. I'm scared, Victoria said quietly, of this, whatever this is. So am I. I just got divorced. I just turned down a massive acquisition offer. My life is a mess, Daniel. I don't know what I'm doing with my company or my future or anything. I have a 6-year-old daughter and a job that barely pays the bills. I live in a tiny apartment with furniture I found on Craigslist. I'm not exactly a catch. That's not what I meant. I know, but it's true. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Victoria, I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not expecting anything. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't care about you. And I think you care about me too. And maybe that's enough for now. Just caring about each other and seeing where it goes. Victoria felt tears threaten again. When did you get so emotionally intelligent? 6 years of single parenting. You learn a lot about feelings when you're helping a toddler navigate emotions she doesn't have words for yet. I don't want to mess this up, Victoria said. Your life. Emma's life. You've both been so kind to me, and I don't want to be another person who disappoints you. Hey. Daniel moved to sit beside her on the couch, close but not touching. You couldn't disappoint us if you tried. Emma thinks you hung the moon, and He paused. I haven't felt this hopeful about anything in years. You make me remember that life can be more than just getting through the day. Victoria looked at him, this good man with his honest eyes and gentle strength, and made a choice. She closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was soft and tentative and absolutely terrifying, and when they pulled apart, Daniel was smiling. Okay, he said. Okay? That was a good first kiss. I'm in favor of more of those. Victoria laughed, surprised by her own boldness. Just to be clear, I have no idea what I'm doing. Relationship-wise, I'm terrible at this. I haven't been on a date in 6 years. We'll figure it out together. They sat on the couch, Victoria's head on Daniel's shoulder, and talked until nearly midnight, about their fears and hopes and the strange courage it took to start over, about Emma and the company and what it meant to build a life instead of just surviving one. When Victoria finally left, Daniel walked her to the door and kissed her goodnight, and for the first time since moving to Austin, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Across the hall in her apartment, Victoria got ready for bed and checked her phone. Messages from the board, from Robert, from her mother. All of them could wait until tomorrow. Instead, she opened the photo app and took a new picture. Just herself, standing by the window in soft lamplight, smiling genuinely. She set it as her lock screen, replacing the old photo. This was her now. Not the woman trying to find peace, but the woman learning to create it. In his apartment, Daniel lay awake long after he should have been asleep, thinking about Victoria's kiss and the way she'd looked at him like he was someone worth knowing. Emma's voice came from her doorway. Daddy, are you awake? Yeah, sweetheart. Can't sleep? She patted over to his bed, pancake under her arm, and he lifted the covers so she could climb in. I heard you kissing Victoria, Emma said, matter-of-factly. Daniel felt his face heat. You were supposed to be asleep. I was mostly asleep, but I got up to get water, and I heard. Emma snuggled against him. Does this mean she's your girlfriend? I don't know what it means yet. We're figuring it out. Do you love her? The question was so direct, so childishly blunt, that Daniel had to think carefully about his answer. I think I could, he said honestly. But love takes time, Emma. It's not like in movies where you just know immediately. I know immediately, Emma said. I knew I loved Pancake the second I saw him at the store, and I knew I loved Victoria when she did the dragon voice. Daniel smiled in the darkness. You have good instincts. I know, that's what Miss Jennifer says. Emma yawned. If you love Victoria, it's okay with me. And Pancake. We voted, and we both said yes. I'm glad I have your approval. You're welcome. Now can I sleep here? My room is too dark. Your room is the same darkness it always is. But tonight it feels darker. But Daniel knew better than to argue with 6-year-old logic. Okay, but just for tonight. Emma was asleep within minutes, her breathing soft and even. Daniel lay awake longer, thinking about the future for the first time in years without fear. Maybe things would work out with Victoria. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe the company would thrive, or maybe it would struggle. Maybe his life would stay small and simple, or maybe it would expand into something bigger. But for the first time since Emma's mother had left that note on the counter, Daniel felt like he was moving towards something instead of just surviving. That felt like enough. Across the hall, Victoria fell asleep thinking the same thing, her new lock screen photo glowing softly in the darkness. A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, choosing yourself means finding someone else who sees you clearly and chooses you right back. The weeks that followed that first kiss unfolded with a rhythm that felt both new and inevitable, like a song Daniel had been waiting his whole life to hear. He and Victoria didn't rush into anything, didn't make grand declarations or change their living situations. They simply let their lives weave together naturally, one dinner at a time, one conversation at a time, one quiet moment at a time. But Austin had other plans for keeping things simple. 3 weeks after Victoria turned down the acquisition offer, Daniel came home from work to find her sitting on the hallway floor outside his apartment, laptop balanced on her knees, phone pressed to her ear. Her expression was tight with frustration, and she held up one finger in a "give me a minute" gesture. "I understand your concerns, Margaret, but the answer is still no," Victoria said into the phone, her voice strained with forced patience. "We're not changing our production timeline just because the board wants faster growth." "Yes, I'm aware that makes me difficult." "That's fine. Put it in writing and send it to my attorney." She ended the call and dropped her head back against the wall with a heavy thud. "Rough day?" Daniel asked, unlocking his door. "Rough week, rough month. Pick your time frame." Victoria closed her laptop with more force than necessary. "2 of my board members are threatening to force a vote of no confidence. Robert leaked to the press that I turned down the acquisition, so now everyone thinks the company is struggling. And my mother called to tell me I'm destroying my father's legacy, which is interesting since my father has been dead for 10 years and never had anything to do with my company." Daniel set down his work bag and slid down the wall to sit beside her. The hallway carpet was worn and slightly sticky, but neither of them seemed to care. "What can I do?" he asked. "Tell me I'm not crazy. Tell me I didn't ruin everything by trying to do things my way." "You're not crazy. You're principled, and anyone who can't see the difference doesn't deserve to be making decisions about your company." Victoria turned to look at him, and her eyes were glassy with unshed tears. "What if they're right, though? What if I'm just being stubborn and proud, and I'm going to tank everything I've built because I couldn't compromise? Is that what you think you're doing?" "I don't know what I think anymore." Victoria's voice cracked. "I've been in emergency meetings all week. Half my board wants to override my decision. My CFO is barely speaking to me. 3 major retailers are reconsidering their contracts because they're worried about instability. And I'm so tired, Daniel. I'm so tired of fighting." From inside the apartment, Emma's voice called out, "Daddy, is that Victoria? Can she come in?" Daniel looked at Victoria, raising his eyebrows in question. She nodded, wiping quickly at her eyes. "Yeah, I could use some Emma energy right now." Inside, Emma was at the kitchen table with Mrs. Chen, who'd been watching her after school. Emma took one look at Victoria's face and immediately went into comfort mode, dragging her to the couch and insisting that Pancake needed to sit on her lap for emotional support. Mrs. Chen caught Daniel's eye and mouthed, "Bad day?" "Bad week," Daniel mouthed back. Mrs. Chen nodded knowingly, patted his shoulder, and let herself out quietly. For the next hour, Emma performed an elaborate puppet show using Pancake and various other stuffed animals, narrating a story about a brave rabbit who had to make hard choices to save his forest friends. It was transparently about Victoria's situation, filtered through a 6-year-old's understanding of conflict resolution, and it was exactly what Victoria needed. By the time Emma finished, with Pancake triumphantly saving the day by believing in himself and not listening to mean squirrels, Victoria was actually smiling. "Thank you," she told Emma seriously. "That was very helpful. Pancake is very wise about mean squirrels." "I know. That's why I let him make important decisions." Emma climbed onto the couch beside Victoria. "Are the people at your work being mean squirrels?" "Some of them are, yeah." "Then you should do what Pancake did. Believe in yourself and don't listen." "That's good advice." "I know. I'm good at advice." Emma snuggled against Victoria's side, and Daniel watched Victoria's expression soften completely. Daddy says when people are mean, it's because they're scared. Are your mean squirrels scared? Victoria looked at Daniel over Emma's head, something shifting in her expression. You know what? I think they might be. After Emma went to bed, Daniel made tea while Victoria sat at his kitchen table, her laptop open again but untouched. She's right, isn't she? Victoria said quietly. The board members fighting me, Robert's anger, even my mother's phone calls. They're all coming from fear. Usually are. Daniel set a mug in front of her. Fear of losing money, fear of being wrong, fear of losing control. Fear makes people mean. I've been so focused on defending my position that I didn't stop to think about what they're actually afraid of. Victoria wrapped her hands around the warm mug. The board is scared that without the acquisition money, the company will stagnate. Robert's scared that if I don't follow traditional growth models, he'll look bad to other potential employers. My mother's scared that if I fail publicly, it'll reflect on our family name. And none of those fears have anything to do with you actually failing. No, they don't. Victoria took a sip of tea, her expression thoughtful. I've been so defensive, fighting every criticism, pushing back against every concern. But maybe what I need to do is actually address the fear instead of just reacting to the anger. What does that look like? I don't know yet, but I think I need to stop fighting and start leading. Victoria met his eyes. Thank you. For this. For letting me fall apart in your hallway and then putting me back together with tea and your daughter's puppet show. Pancake did most of the work. Pancake is an excellent therapist. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. You're going to figure this out. You're one of the smartest people I've ever met, and you care about your company for the right reasons. That matters. Does it? Because right now it feels like caring doesn't count for much against profit margins and growth projections. It counts. It might not count to your board or your CFO, but it counts to the people who actually use your products. The ones who trust your company because you built it on principles instead of just profit. Victoria squeezed his hand. How do you always know exactly what to say? I don't. I just know what it's like to feel like you're failing at something that matters to you. And I know that sometimes you need someone to remind you why you started in the first place. They sat in the quiet kitchen, hands linked across the table, and Daniel felt the weight of what was building between them. This wasn't just attraction or convenience or two lonely people finding comfort. This was something real and potentially permanent, and that scared him almost as much as it excited him. I should go, Victoria said eventually. You have work tomorrow, and I have another board meeting that I'm definitely not prepared for. Or, Daniel said carefully, you could stay on the couch, just so you're not alone tonight. Victoria looked at him, surprised. Are you sure? I'm sure. I'll get you a blanket and pillow. It's not fancy, but it's better than going back to an empty apartment to stress about tomorrow. What about Emma? Won't she ask questions? She'll probably ask if you're having a sleepover, and I'll tell her yes, because adults sometimes need sleepovers too when they've had hard days. Victoria's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were different, grateful instead of frustrated. Okay, yes, I'd like that. Daniel set her up on the couch with his nicest blanket and an extra pillow, and they talked quietly until nearly midnight, about her fears for the company, about his worries for Emma as she got older, about what it meant to build a life that felt authentic instead of just successful. When they finally said goodnight, Daniel hesitated in the doorway to his bedroom. Victoria? Yeah? Whatever happens with the company, you're going to be okay. Because you're not just your business. You're a person who feeds birds at farmers markets and does dragon voices and lets a 6-year-old stuffed rabbit give you life advice. That person is going to be okay no matter what happens in a boardroom. Victoria's smile was soft in the dim light from the kitchen. Thank you for seeing that person. For a while there, I forgot she existed. She exists. I see her every day. Daniel went to bed feeling like he'd said something important, something that mattered beyond the immediate crisis. Across the small apartment, Victoria lay on his couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like laundry detergent and faintly like him, and felt safer than she had in weeks. The next morning, Emma found Victoria asleep on the couch and whispered loudly to Daniel, Is she okay? Did the mean squirrels hurt her feelings? She's okay, sweetheart. Just needed a friend last night. Good. Friends are important. Miss Jennifer says friends make hard things easier. Miss Jennifer is right. Emma padded over to the couch and gently placed Pancake on the coffee table where Victoria would see him when she woke up. For when she needs him, Emma whispered. Daniel's heart swelled with pride for his kind, perceptive daughter. When Victoria woke an hour later, she found Pancake watching over her, Daniel making breakfast in the kitchen, and Emma humming while she got ready for school. It was chaotic and warm and exactly what she needed before facing another day of corporate warfare. Over quick breakfast, Victoria seemed more centered, more determined. I have a plan, she announced, spreading jam on toast. It might be a terrible plan, but it's a plan. Let's hear it, Daniel said. I'm going to call an all-hands meeting. Everyone in the company, from executives to the intern we just hired. And I'm going to tell them the truth. About the acquisition offer, about the board's concerns, about why I said no. And then I'm going to ask them what they think the company should be. Daniel set down his coffee mug. That's brave. Or stupid. I'm honestly not sure which. Victoria looked at Emma. What does Pancake think? Emma picked up the rabbit and held him to her ear, nodding seriously as if receiving important information. Pancake says brave things and stupid things are sometimes the same thing. You just don't know which one until after. Pancake has a point, Daniel said. Pancake is smarter than my entire board, Victoria replied. The meeting happened 2 days later on a Friday afternoon. Victoria rented out a community center space because her office wasn't big enough to hold everyone, and she stood in front of 127 employees with no script, no PowerPoint, just honesty. She told them about the acquisition offer, about the $40 million she'd turned down, about the board's anger and the threats of a no-confidence vote, about her own doubts and fears, and then she told them why she'd said no. I started this company because I believed wellness shouldn't be a luxury good, she said, her voice steady. I believe that everyone deserves access to products that actually help them feel better, not just products marketed to make them feel like they should feel better. And I was terrified that selling to a corporation would turn us into just another brand that talks about authenticity while prioritizing profit margins. She paused, looking out at the faces watching her. Young people who'd taken a chance on a growing company, parents supporting families, people who'd believed in her vision enough to build their careers around it. But here's the thing, Victoria continued. This isn't just my company anymore. It belongs to all of you too. You're the ones doing the actual work. You're the ones talking to customers and developing products and building relationships with partners. So I'm asking you, what do you think we should be? What kind of company do you want to work for? The silence that followed felt eternal. Then Maya, her assistant, raised her hand. I came here because my sister struggled with anxiety and couldn't afford therapy. Your meditation app partnership gave her tools she could actually use. That mattered more to me than salary. I want to work for a company that still cares about that. A product developer spoke up next. My dad died of a heart attack at 52 because he worked himself to death at a company that demanded growth at any cost. I don't want to be part of that story. I want to build something sustainable. One by one, people shared their reasons for joining the company, their hopes for what it could become. Not everyone agreed. Some wanted aggressive expansion, thought Victoria's caution would limit their opportunities. But most spoke about values and impact, about building something that mattered beyond quarterly profits. By the end of the meeting, Victoria had a clearer picture of her company than any board meeting had ever given her. That evening, she knocked on Daniel's door with tear-streaked makeup and an exhausted smile. How'd it go? He asked, pulling her inside. I think I just remembered why I started this whole thing. Victoria collapsed onto his couch. My team gets it. Not all of them, but most of them. They understand what I'm trying to protect. Emma emerged from her room, took one look at Victoria, and declared, You need ice cream. Ice cream fixes everything. I'm not sure ice cream fixes corporate governance issues, Victoria said. Have you tried? That's a fair point. They walked to the ice cream shop 2 blocks away, Emma skipping ahead while Daniel and Victoria followed hand in hand. It was a small thing, that linked hands, but it felt monumental. A public declaration that they were something, even if neither of them had quite defined what that something was yet. At the ice cream shop, Emma ordered her usual chocolate, while Victoria surprised them by asking for bubblegum flavor. Bubblegum? Daniel asked. I haven't had bubblegum ice cream since I was Emma's age. My mother said it was common. Victoria took a triumphant bite. This is my rebellion. That's the saddest rebellion I've ever heard, Daniel said, but he was smiling. They ate their ice cream on a bench outside, watching the sun set over the Austin skyline, and for a moment everything felt manageable. The board could vote however they wanted. Robert could disapprove. Her mother could judge. But Victoria had this, strawberry ice cream and a 6-year-old's wisdom, and a man who held her hand like it was something precious. The board meeting happened the following Tuesday. Victoria walked in prepared for a fight, armed with data from the all-hands meeting and a new proposal for sustainable growth that prioritized long-term stability over short-term gains. She expected resistance. What she got was something more complicated. Robert presented the board with financial projections showing that Victoria's refusal of the acquisition had actually generated positive press. Consumers responded well to the story of a CEO who chose principles over profit. Sales were up 12% since the news broke. "I'm still not convinced this was the right move," Robert said, his tone grudging. "But I can't argue with the numbers. The market likes that you said no." One of the board members who'd threatened a no-confidence vote spoke up. "I've been getting emails from customers, a lot of them, saying they trust the brand more now because they know it's not being sold out. That counts for something." The meeting ended without a vote, without threats, without the apocalyptic confrontation Victoria had been bracing for. Instead, they agreed to try Victoria's sustainable growth model for 6 months and reassess. It wasn't total victory, but it was enough. Victoria called Daniel from the parking lot, her hands shaking with relief. "They didn't fire me," she said when he answered. "Of course they didn't fire you. You're brilliant, and you were right. They might still disagree with me. Robert definitely still thinks I'm being naive, but they're willing to try it my way. That's all you needed, a chance to prove that doing things differently can still work." Victoria leaned against her car, closing her eyes against the afternoon sun. "I couldn't have done this without you, without Emma, without Pancake's emotional support and puppet show wisdom." "Pancake will be thrilled to know he helped. Tell him thank you. Tell him he's better than every business consultant I've ever hired." "Will do." Daniel paused. "Are you coming over tonight? Emma wants to cook you dinner, by which I mean she wants to make you her specialty, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with the crusts cut off." "That sounds perfect." That night, sitting at Daniel's kitchen table eating sandwiches and apple slices while Emma explained her elaborate system for organizing her stuffed animals by personality type, Victoria felt something click into place. This was enough. This small apartment with its second-hand furniture and sticky floors, this man who worked with his hands and raised his daughter with quiet competence, this child who believed in stuffed rabbit wisdom and saw the world with uncomplicated clarity. She didn't need the mansion in California or the corporate prestige or her mother's approval. She needed this. People who saw her and valued her for who she actually was, not what she could provide or represent. After Emma went to bed, Daniel and Victoria sat on his tiny balcony, barely big enough for 2 chairs, looking out at the city lights. "I've been thinking," Victoria said quietly. About what comes next, not just with the company, but with everything. My lease is up in 2 months." Daniel's hand tightened on his beer bottle. "Are you leaving Austin?" "No, that's the thing. I don't want to leave. I've been happier here in 3 months than I was in 6 years in California. But I've also been thinking that maybe I don't need such a nice apartment. Maybe I could find something smaller, more affordable, maybe even in this building." "Victoria, you don't have to downsize your life just because that's not what this is. I'm not martyring myself. I'm choosing what actually makes me happy." She turned to face him. "Do you know what I realized at that all-hands meeting? I've been carrying this weight of having to be successful enough to justify all my choices. Successful enough that leaving my marriage was the right call. Successful enough that moving to Austin wasn't running away. Successful enough that my parents couldn't say I wasted my potential. But I'm exhausted, Daniel. I'm so tired of trying to prove something. What do you want instead?" Victoria looked at him, this good man who'd let her into his life without asking for anything in return, and felt tears well up. "I want to build something real, a company that actually helps people, even if it's smaller. A life that feels like mine, even if it's not impressive on paper. And I want—" She stopped, suddenly scared to say it out loud. "What do you want?" Daniel asked gently. "I want this. You and Emma, and farmers markets and ice cream and puppet shows. I want the mess and the chaos and the realness of it. I want to stop performing and start living. Daniel set down his beer and took her hand. You sure about that? Because Emma and I come as a package deal. And we're a lot of mess and chaos. I'm sure. I'm terrified. I've never been a stepmother. I don't know how to be in a relationship that isn't based on mutual ambition. I'm probably going to mess this up in 17 different ways. But I want to try. I'm terrified too, Daniel admitted. I haven't let anyone close to Emma since her mother left. The idea of you becoming important to her and then leaving, it scares the hell out of me. I'm not leaving. I know you don't have any reason to believe that, given your history. But I'm not her mother. I'm not someone who sees you and Emma as obstacles to my real life. You are my real life now, or at least I want you to be. Daniel pulled her close, and they sat there on the cramped balcony, holding each other while the city hummed around them. So what does this mean, exactly? He asked against her hair. I don't know. We figure it out as we go? Victoria pulled back to look at him. Maybe I find an apartment on a lower floor. Maybe we start officially dating instead of this ambiguous thing we've been doing. Maybe in 6 months or a year we talk about something more permanent. But we do it honestly, without performing or pretending to be something we're not. I can do honest. So can I, finally. They kissed on the balcony while Austin sprawled below them, alive and messy and real. And both of them felt like they were finally done running from the lives they'd left behind and ready to build something new. 2 months later, Victoria moved into apartment 2B, 2 floors below Daniel and Emma. It was smaller than her previous place, more affordable, and close enough that Emma could run down for visits, but far enough that everyone had their own space. The board approved her sustainable growth model after the 6-month trial showed steady, if unspectacular, progress. Robert eventually came around, admitting that Victoria might have been right about protecting the company's values. 2 board members who couldn't accept the new direction sold their shares, and Victoria found new investors who actually cared about the mission beyond the returns. The company didn't become a massive corporation. It stayed mid-sized, sustainable, focused. And Victoria found that she could sleep at night again. Her mother called less frequently, and when she did, Victoria learned to set boundaries. No, she wouldn't reconsider the acquisition. No, she wouldn't move back to California. No, she wouldn't defend her choices to people who'd already decided she was wrong. Richard stopped calling entirely after Victoria sent a formal cease and desist letter. He was dating someone new, according to social media, already trying to mold another successful woman into his ideal partner. Victoria didn't care anymore. She'd stopped checking his social media, stopped comparing her life to the one she'd left behind. Because her life now involved Saturday morning farmers markets and Wednesday night dinners where Emma insisted on helping cook. It involved Daniel teaching her how to change her own oil and her teaching Emma about business in terms a 6-year-old could understand. It involved puppet shows and movie nights and the chaotic, beautiful mess of building a family that didn't look like anyone's idea of traditional but felt more real than anything Victoria had ever known. On a quiet Sunday evening, 6 months after Victoria's move, the 3 of them sat in Daniel's apartment playing a board game. Emma was winning, as usual, through a combination of actual strategy and 6-year-old charm that convinced the adults to make questionable trades. This is rigged, Daniel complained as Emma claimed another victory. It's not rigged. You're just bad at negotiation, Emma said matter-of-factly. Victoria laughed. She's not wrong. I'm good at negotiation. I negotiate with customers every day at work. Daddy, you fix cars. That's not negotiating. Sometimes I have to convince people that they need an oil change when they think they're fine. That's just telling the truth. Victoria negotiates. She has board meetings. Had board meetings, Victoria corrected. I restructured. Now I have team meetings where everyone actually gets to participate instead of just listening to executives argue. Emma considered this. That sounds better. Pancake says everyone should get to talk. Pancake is a leadership expert, Victoria agreed. They played another round and Daniel watched Victoria laugh at one of Emma's elaborate game strategies. His daughter had taken to calling Victoria just V now, a nickname that felt both casual and affectionate. They had their own inside jokes, their own traditions. Emma had even started asking Victoria for advice about things she used to only ask Daniel about. It had been scary at first, watching his daughter love someone else. But now Daniel realized it wasn't a threat. It was a gift. Emma had more love in her life, more perspectives, more people who saw her as special. After Emma went to bed, Daniel and Victoria cleaned up the game pieces in comfortable silence. "Can I tell you something?" Victoria said, putting the box away. "Always." "I got an email yesterday from a headhunter, big tech company in San Francisco looking for a CEO for their new wellness division. The salary they quoted was 3 times what I pay myself now." Daniel's hand stilled on the game pieces he was collecting. "Are you going to take it?" "Not even a little bit." Victoria came to stand beside him. "A year ago, I would have at least considered it. Looked at the numbers, weighed the prestige, wondered if it was the smarter move. But yesterday I just deleted the email without even finishing reading it." "Why?" "Because I already have everything I want. A company I believe in, even if it's smaller than it could be. An apartment I can actually afford. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market. Wednesday dinners with a 6-year-old who insists vegetables need emotional support to taste good. And you." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I don't need a bigger salary or a fancier title or my mother's approval," Victoria continued. "I need this, exactly this. Is that crazy?" "No," Daniel said, pulling her close. "That's the sanest thing I've ever heard." They stood in his small kitchen, holding each other while the dishwasher hummed and the building settled into nighttime quiet. "I love you," Victoria said quietly. "I know we haven't said it yet, and maybe it's too soon, but I do. I love you and Emma and this weird, beautiful life we're building together." Daniel pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were bright with emotion. "I love you too. Have for a while now. I was just scared to say it." "Why?" "Because the last time I loved someone and believed it was real, she left. And I didn't know if I could survive that happening again, especially if Emma loved you too." "I'm not leaving," Victoria said firmly. "I'm done running from things. I'm staying right here, in this building, in this city, with you and Emma and Pancake's infinite wisdom. That's my choice, and I'm making it every single day." They kissed in the kitchen, and it felt like a promise. Not the dramatic movie-style promise of forever, but the quieter, more real promise of showing up, of choosing each other over and over again, even when it was hard, even when it would be easier to run. Emma appeared in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. "Are you guys being mushy? Mrs. Chen says grown-ups get mushy when they're in love." "We might be a little mushy," Daniel admitted. Emma patted over and wrapped her arms around both of them. "Good. Pancake says mushy is important. It means people care about each other." "When did you talk to Pancake about this?" Victoria asked. "We have conversations. He's very emotionally intelligent." They stood there in a 3-person hug, this family they'd built from broken pieces and second chances, and Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete. Not because Victoria had filled some empty space in his life, but because she'd reminded him that he was allowed to want more than just survival. That he could build something beautiful even after everything had fallen apart. A year later, on a sunny Saturday morning, Daniel stood in his apartment holding a small velvet box and feeling like he might throw up from nerves. "You look scared," Emma observed from her spot on the couch, where she was supposed to be putting on her shoes. "I am scared." "Why?" "Victoria already said she loves us. She says it all the time." "I know, but this is different. This is asking her to make it official." Emma came over and hugged his leg. "Daddy, she's going to say yes. She'd be silly not to. You're great and I'm great and we live in a nice building with Mrs. Chen and Marcus and Julio. What's not to want?" "You make a compelling argument." "I know, I'm good at arguments. Miss Jennifer says I should be a lawyer." They walked down 2 flights of stairs to Victoria's apartment, where she was waiting with coffee and pastries for their usual farmer's market morning. She opened the door in jeans and a loose white shirt, her hair pulled back, no makeup, looking nothing like the CEO who'd moved in across the hall 18 months ago, and everything like the woman Daniel wanted to spend his life with. "Ready?" she asked, grabbing her canvas market bag. "Actually, can we talk for a minute first?" Something in his tone made her pause. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, more than okay. Daniel looked at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. "I've been thinking a lot about what we're building here. This life, this family, and I know we said we'd take things slow, figure it out as we go. But I'm tired of slow. I'm tired of being careful." He pulled out the box and opened it, revealing a simple silver band with a small diamond. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I'm not asking you to give up your company or change your life, or fit into some traditional idea of what this should look like. I'm just asking if you want to make this official. If you want to be my wife and Emma's stepmom, and part of this chaotic, messy, beautiful thing we've built together. Victoria's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. That's a yes, right? Emma whispered loudly. Because if it's not, Pancake and I are going to be very disappointed. Victoria laughed through her tears. It's a yes. It's absolutely a yes. Daniel slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands, and then Victoria was kissing him while Emma cheered and jumped around them. I can't believe you were nervous, Victoria said when they finally broke apart. Of course I said yes. You're my home, both of you. You're the life I didn't know I was looking for. Does this mean you're officially my mom now? Emma asked. Victoria crouched down to Emma's level. If you want me to be, I know I'll never replace your birth mom, and I'm not trying to. But I love you like you're mine, and if you want to call me mom, I would be honored. Emma threw her arms around Victoria's neck. I want to. I've wanted to for a while, but I didn't know if I was allowed. You're allowed. You're allowed to love as many people as your heart has room for. They stood there in the hallway, the three of them holding each other, and Mrs. Chen emerged from her apartment with perfect timing. Finally, she exclaimed. I told Marcus this was coming. He owes me $20. She pulled out her phone. Now everyone get together. I need a picture for the building group chat. They took the picture, and then Victoria insisted they still go to the farmer's market because we have a tradition to maintain. So they went, newly engaged, Emma skipping ahead while Daniel and Victoria walked hand in hand and bought flowers and vegetables and stopped for breakfast at their usual cafe. The waitress who'd been serving them for months took one look at Victoria's ring and squealed. I knew it. I told my coworker you two were going to end up married. She said you were just friends, but I knew. You were right, Victoria said, smiling so wide her face hurt. They spent the day celebrating in small ways. Ice cream after the market, a movie in the afternoon, dinner at Victoria's apartment where Emma insisted on making fancy spaghetti, which was just regular spaghetti with extra parmesan. After Emma fell asleep on Victoria's couch, she'd been doing that more and more, comfortable in both apartments, Daniel and Victoria sat on her balcony, similar to his but with a slightly better view. I can't believe this is my life now, Victoria said quietly. 2 years ago I was miserable in California, trapped in a marriage that was slowly killing me, running a company that felt more like a cage than a dream. And now I'm here, engaged to a man who sees me, raising a daughter who makes me laugh every single day, running a company that actually aligns with my values, even if it's not as big as it could be. Do you miss it? Daniel asked. The big success? The prestige? Any of it? Victoria thought about it honestly. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of having clear metrics for success. Revenue up means you're doing well. Revenue down means you're failing. It was easier than this constant navigation of values and sustainability and trying to grow without compromising principles. But I don't miss the person I was when I had all that. She was successful, but she was empty. And I'd rather be full of life than full of accomplishments. You can have both, you know. You're having both. Maybe. But I've learned that the kind of success that matters to me isn't the kind that impresses strangers. It's the kind that lets me sleep at night, the kind that means the people I love feel loved, the kind that builds something sustainable instead of something flashy. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the city sounds drift up from below. Thank you, Victoria said eventually. For what? For finding my phone that day, for being honest about seeing my lock screen, for inviting me to dinner and teaching me to hang pictures and letting me cry on your couch, for seeing past the CEO to the person underneath, for loving that person even when she was a mess. You weren't a mess. You were just figuring things out. I was absolutely a mess. But you let me be a mess in a safe place, and that made all the difference. Daniel kissed the top of her head. For what it's worth, you did the same for me. I'd been sleepwalking through life for 6 years. Just going through motions, keeping Emma safe and fed and loved, but not actually living. You reminded me that I was allowed to want more, that I could have dreams again. Have you thought about going back to school? Victoria asked. Finishing that engineering degree? Sometimes, but I don't know if that's actually what I want anymore, or just what I thought I wanted when I was 22. These days, I think I might want something different. Like what? I've been thinking about opening my own shop. Just a small garage, maybe 2 or 3 bays, hire a couple of guys, build something of my own instead of working for Martinez forever. He paused. Is that crazy? Starting a business at 34 with a kid and a fiancé to support? No crazier than turning down $40 million to keep a company small and principled, Victoria said. If you want to do it, we'll figure it out. We're good at figuring things out. We are, aren't we? We really are. 6 months later, they got married in a small ceremony at the farmer's market where they'd spent so many Saturday mornings. Emma was the flower girl, wearing a purple dress she'd picked out herself and carrying Pancake as her emotional support rabbit. Mrs. Chen officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. Marcus and Julio from downstairs were groomsmen. Maya and several employees from Victoria's company came. Martinez was there with his whole family. It was small and slightly chaotic and absolutely perfect. Victoria's mother didn't come, sending a card with a check and a note saying she hoped Victoria knew what she was doing. Victoria deposited the check in Emma's college fund and threw away the note without a second thought. Her grandmother would have loved it, Victoria thought, as she stood under a simple arch decorated with sunflowers, holding Daniel's hands while Mrs. Chen read a ceremony she'd written herself. Her grandmother would have loved the mess and the authenticity and the choice to build something real instead of something impressive. When they kissed as husband and wife, Emma cheered louder than anyone, and Victoria felt a completeness she'd never experienced before. This was her family, her choice, her life. The reception was at a local restaurant, nothing fancy, just good food and people who actually cared about them. Emma gave a speech that was mostly about how Pancake approved of the marriage and had offered his congratulations. Victoria's employees presented them with a gift certificate for a weekend getaway. Martinez gave Daniel the keys to a storage unit he'd been renting, saying, "For when you're ready to start that garage, kid, I've got some old equipment you can have." That night, after the party ended and Emma was safely with Mrs. Chen for the weekend, Daniel and Victoria went back to their building. They decided to keep both apartments for now, Victoria's for her home office and quiet workspace, Daniel's as the main living area. It was unconventional, but it worked for them. Standing in the hallway between their 2 doors, Victoria looked at the man she'd just married and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "I love you," she said. "I love this life we've built. I love that we did it honestly, without pretending to be anything we're not." "I love you too," Daniel said. "And I love that we get to keep building it, every single day." They went into Daniel's apartment, their apartment now, officially, and Victoria saw that he'd framed that original lock screen photo, the one he'd accidentally seen the day he found her phone. It sat on the bookshelf, a reminder of where they'd started. Next to it was a new photo, the 3 of them at the farmer's market, laughing at something Emma had said, looking nothing like a traditional family and everything like a real one. "When did you frame these?" Victoria asked. "Last week. I wanted you to see where we started and where we are now, how far we've both come." Victoria studied the 2 images. In the first one, she looked peaceful but solitary, caught in a moment of private contemplation. In the second, she looked joyful and connected, part of something bigger than herself. "I like who I am now better," she said quietly. The person in that first photo was trying to find herself. The person in this second one has actually done it. "You did it," Daniel corrected, "by being brave enough to choose what you actually wanted instead of what everyone told you should want." "We both did it. We both chose this." They stood looking at the photos, this visual timeline of their journey, and Daniel wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Thank you for finding my phone," Victoria said, echoing her words from months ago. "Thank you for being honest about what you saw. Thank you for seeing me when I'd forgotten how to see myself. Thank you for knocking on my door instead of assuming the worst. Thank you for teaching Emma that success can look different than the world tells us. Thank you for reminding me that it's never too late to start living instead of just surviving." Outside, Austin hummed with its Saturday night energy. Inside their small apartment with its secondhand furniture and happy chaos, 2 people who'd both been lost had found something better than what they'd been looking for. They'd found each other. And in finding each other, they'd found themselves. The next morning, Emma burst into their room at 7, Pancake under her arm, announcing that she needed to make them wedding pancakes because That's what families do the day after someone gets married. Daniel groaned, Victoria laughed, and they both got up to help their daughter make a breakfast that would probably be a disaster, but would definitely be made with love. This was their life now. Messy and imperfect and absolutely real. No corporate facades. No pretending. No living at arm's length from the things that mattered. Just three people and one very wise stuffed rabbit building something beautiful from the pieces of their broken pasts, choosing each other every single day. And that, Victoria thought, as Emma cracked eggs with enthusiastic imprecision all over the counter, was the best kind of success there was. The kind you couldn't put on a resume or brag about at cocktail parties. The kind that just felt like home.